Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name is Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Today, I've got several videos for us to go over. The first one's going to be about what Nick's siblings have to say about it, and honestly, it's pretty surprising, and I think it's also pretty telling, as maybe some of the Reiner's mindset in this case that I think didn't really help them at all. Didn't really help Nick, didn't help the Rob Reiner himself. And I think you see some of their thinking and what the siblings had to say about the case. And we're going to see that in the video. The last video I'm going to play today is a little miscellaneous. It's about this Rhode Island politician. It was a former candidate for mayor of Cranston, Rhode Island. She got arrested for DUI. And luckily for us, the cop had his body cam on. And so we were able to see all of the toxic ways this woman was behaving. And it goes over a lot of the narcissistic behaviors that I talk about: entitlement, guilt tripping, all sorts. So I think that'll be a cool thing to watch. Danielle, welcome. Hello, Black Sheep friends. How are you? Happy Saturday. Happy Saturday to you, crazy. So let's reiterate some of the other things about this case too. I've made a post about this on Facebook. And people were telling me that, oh, don't you know, Jared, that he's diagnosed with schizophrenia and he was diagnosed as a teen. And it's like, where did you hear that? Where did you hear that? That was not confirmed anywhere. The only place that schizophrenia diagnosis came from was TMZ. And TMZ said that an undisclosed source close to the case told them. But until that's verified, you can't really truly believe that. I mean, you can say, okay, maybe, but is it a sure thing? No. Other people were saying, well, he was definitely clean for 6 years. Can you say that? No, you can't say that either. Or, oh, he was on this med or that med. You don't know what meds he was on. We don't know the toxicology report. So people jump to all of these conclusions, or they just believe whatever they hear online. But they don't think to have the critical thinking to take a step back and say, I wonder if this is true. Where did they get it from? But people just jump to conclusions. It's like it's Office Space. Got to pull out their jump to conclusions mat. Danielle says, I would think that if he were to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, it would have happened sooner, but what do I know? Yeah, generally, what do they say? Between like 12 to something, like 12 to mid-20s or so is generally when it's diagnosed. I think one of the doctors we listened to said that. And would be a little unusual for Nick to be diagnosed with it at 32. But again, we don't know when they're saying he got diagnosed with it. As far as I know, this is the first we've heard of him being diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, maybe the family knew. Maybe. And maybe they just didn't disclose it. Why? Because it's not everyone's business, right? And that would make sense too. But we have to be really careful being so certain about things. But I was being accused of spreading misinformation. Other people are telling me you shouldn't be talking about this at all. You're not qualified to mention any of this. And I'll repeat again, it's not about trying to smear Nick Reiner or his parents or blame his parents for his death. It's all about trying to learn from the situation so it's the least likely to happen again. And a lot of parents have a kid that has to deal with addiction. A lot of parents have loved ones that have to deal with mental illness. This is not an uncommon thing in any way. So that's why I think it's important to talk about it. And I think one of the ultimate things that I take away from this case is, besides the fact that Rob and his wife needed boundaries and consequences, and there comes a point when, quote unquote, being firm, I think is actually very helpful. The other part is being able to be committed against your will. That is, I think, the big thing to point to in the case. But let's see here. Maureen says, I wonder if he was ever arrested prior. I have never known a person who suffered from addiction not have a record. Correct. I mean, most people that have struggled with addiction absolutely at least have some petty misdemeanors and things, right? Absolutely. I know I did. Now, why might that not have happened for him? Possibly because of who he is. He might have gotten like a get out of jail free card. Do you know who my dad is? My dad's Rob Reiner. And I don't know how well that works in Hollywood. I don't know how well that works if you're a Malibu police officer or Brentwood, I think is where they were from. Like, oh, don't you know who I am? I'm Rob Reiner. Or don't you know who I am? I'm Rob Reiner's son. Cheryl says, in schizophrenia, males typically experience onset earlier than females. Symptoms most often appear in the late teenage years to the early 20s. Correct, yes. With a peak between approximately ages 18 and 25. Yeah, that makes sense. The onset in males is often more abrupt and is more likely to begin with negative symptoms such as social withdrawal, diminished emotional expression, and cognitive difficulties. The diminished emotional expression is interesting to me because, again, I'm not sure if undiagnosed autism or schizophrenia is what I would see in him. And again, just because I would say undiagnosed autism, that does not mean people with autism are violent. Just like it doesn't mean that people with schizophrenia are violent either. There's a small subset of people that may have schizophrenia that could be violent. And the same with autism. There's a small subset of it. So don't think I'm smearing the whole disorder. What's being leaked is one-sided. I will wait to hear hopefully both sides. It's very wise of you, Miss Ellie. Welcome. There's a claim of schizophrenia diagnosis, but no precise time of that alleged diagnosis. It may have been recently or years previous. Correct. Yes, absolutely. Could years of drug use cause eventual schizophrenia? That's a debatable question, Windows. And it's a good question, though, because I think if you use crack or meth continuously, you can mimic the symptoms of schizophrenia. But is that truly schizophrenia? I think that part's debatable. Some people think maybe. But also what can happen is you have schizophrenia and then you use stimulants like crack or meth and it gets much worse. It gets much worse. Schizophrenia can be mixed and confused with drug psychosis. Absolutely. A lot of this stuff can be intertwined, which makes it difficult. So you have to realize, chicken or the egg, what's coming first here? And with him, there's several things, right? Because schizophrenia, that's a little bit different than a personality disorder. I think vulnerable narcissism is different than schizophrenia, which is different than anxiety and depression, which is different than addiction. There's so many things to unravel here. But here's the first video here. I think you will all find this one interesting. And it also, I think, it speaks to a little bit of the issue here with the Reiner's thinking in the matter. And don't confuse this with me blaming them. Ultimately, the only person to blame here, in my opinion, is Nick himself, not his parents. I think enabling isn't good, but that doesn't mean they deserved what happened to them. Don't get that twisted either. You're very welcome, Ellie. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, I mean, I think schizophrenia is also considered, I think it's considered also a cluster A. Admittedly, I know probably the least about schizophrenia. I know much more about the cluster B disorders, anxiety, depression, addiction. I'm not as well versed on schizophrenia. In fact, I don't know many people who are very well versed on schizophrenia. It just doesn't get the attention. Why would they be mad? They are filthy rich now. It's sick. Maybe they will let him live while with them when they get him out in some crazy insanity. Maybe. All right. Early drug use will hurt the brain, and over time, unfortunately, it gets worse. Just like any disease, it gets worse if not cared for. Absolutely correct. Mac and cheese. Yeah, a little more late today, but we're only 9 minutes in. You didn't miss anything.
The family of Nick Reiner has someone to blame for what happened in that family, the tragedy that is now going to be on trial with Hollywood celebrities giving their testimonies, affidavits, subpoenas, and more. And guess what, folks? It's not who you would think. It's not Nick they're blaming this for.
And he cites the source in here too. You see the article he's pulling that from. That's important. That gives you a +1 in my book when you show your sources.
Hello, friends. Hello, fam. Welcome back yet again to another video where we dive into heavy things, but we lift them with the caution and the deference that you desire as we lift conversations even higher than they would be elsewhere. As we go, click the like button, drop a comment down below, let us know your thoughts, and let's talk about who is being blamed for what Nick Reiner allegedly did. It just so happens, apparently, allegedly, to not be him. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no fun covering this, but yet here we are again because it involves a trial that is forthcoming that will likely involve many of your favorite A-list celebrities. And, well, Blast has this one being hosted on your...
Well, and CG, keep this in mind. The cluster A personality disorders are this. There's paranoid personality disorder, PPD, which is a pervasive distrust and suspicion of others. But then 2, schizoid personality disorder, SZPD, and schizotypal personality disorder, STPD. These are all the 3 cluster A personality disorders. How does that compare and contrast to simply schizophrenia? Maybe you'll say schizophrenia is just the mood portion. I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure what they would consider the difference between those 3. Zelda, welcome.
Yahoo Entertainment, Nick Reiner likely suffered self-worth issues due to pressure of his famous family, addiction expert reveals. This is by Favor Adegoke. But folks, the headline is not what we care for nay, we say there is something buried in the article, which is actually newsworthy as opposed to whatever this is, because we frankly don't care. Well, folks, let me tell you what's going on that's actually newsworthy, okay? We're going to keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. Nick allegedly didn't take his parents' help seriously, okay? And then we're going to get into what they're blaming this on. Amid Nick's struggles, his parents did their best to support him, including paying for his many costly rehabilitation stays. The article says, however, he was reportedly nonchalant about their efforts, regardless of how much they tried to help him each time. I can't believe that the guy who allegedly ended his parents in a horrific and painful and agonizing way didn't care about their help. I can't believe this. Quote, at the end of the day, Nick didn't take their help seriously. This was true for years and years. His issues were far, far out of his parents' control. One insider told People magazine, Nick lied a lot. He was unreliable, but he was also convincing and intelligent, added the insider about his behavior. Still, according to the source, Nick's parents remained supportive of him till the very end. Quote, his family was empathetic to how much his struggles contributed to his behavior. They never lost hope in him, even when he was scaring them or making their lives harder. And here's where we get into the newsworthiness that we need to tell you about. Nick Reiner's family does not see him as a monster, source claims. Now, folks, we're not going to tell you what it is exactly that Nick did in the way that he ended his parents. That's too graphic, but it was.
And so one thing to go over here, the difference. Schizophrenia is a severe psychotic disorder with intense hallucinations, delusions, while schizotypical personality disorder involves chronic eccentricities, odd beliefs, magical thinking, paranoia, and social deficits without the full-blown psychosis. Though brief, less intense psychotic episodes can occur in STPD, making it a spectrum disorder, often seen as a milder form of or precursor to schizophrenia, but distinct due to symptom intensity, duration, and impact on reality testing. The key difference is that schizophrenia involves a major break from reality, whereas STPD involves distorted thinking that individuals with STPD might recognize as unusual, unlike those with schizophrenia. Good to know that.
It's unpleasant, and it was not immediate. Just let that be, okay? So how is the family responding? How is Holly?
And so I guess we'll go over this too. Schizoaffective disorder is a serious mental illness blending symptoms of schizophrenia, psychosis like hallucinations/delusions, with a mood disorder, major depression, or bipolar mania. where psychotic symptoms occur for at least 2 weeks without major mood symptoms, defining it from other conditions. It involves mood episodes, sadness, euphoria, low energy, high energy, and psychotic features, disorganized thinking, paranoia, seeing, hearing things, impacting daily function, but manageable with treatment like therapy and medication. Very interesting. Interesting indeed.
Hollywood responding to this. Prepare yourself. You may need to sit down for this one. This is so out there. Recent reports have emerged indicating that they have expressed opposition to him himself being deleted by the state for what he's done. That penalty, which Nick could face if found guilty for deleting his parents. According to a source, the family does not see him as a monster, as they feel he...
Did you read what I just said? Apparently you didn't listen to what I just said.
He needed help for his issues. Quote, they don't see him as a monster. They see him as someone who has failed, a source told Rob Shooters, the Shooter Scoop. Here's what they say. The family reportedly intends to heavily push back on any prosecutorial plans in line with his life ending as the case continues to proceed. Quote, justice to them means treatment, accountability, and making sure this never happens again. Another death isn't justice. Folks, I'm not going to weigh in on the penalty or anything like that right now. Hang tight. Meanwhile, they are of the belief that the tragic death of the Reiners is, quote, a catastrophic failure of treatment of the mental variety, rather than a premeditated crime. Quote, Nick is seriously ill. They believe ending him won't bring Rob and Michelle back, and it won't fix what went wrong. Now, I don't have any problem with families trying to figure out what to do in this. I can't even imagine. So I'm not holding these kids accountable. They're adults, I know, but they're the Reiner kids. Listen, the problem here, though, is where the blame is being placed according to these reports. The idea that they or Hollywood or anybody is going to say that this was not premeditated and that this was something that we're going to blame on doctors instead. Come on. You know what this is about? We're not going to blame the people who should have called 911 at the Christmas party. We're not going to blame the celebrities who allegedly said, no, don't call the police, don't bring them to my house at the Christmas party. We're not going to blame, the fact that this guy was allowed access and that people heard, allegedly, Rob Reiner said, I'm afraid of my kid. We're not going to blame the people who said, we don't need to, this is a family thing. And we're not going to blame him, even though after he did it, he allegedly went to a seaside hotel, booked a room with a view so he could watch the ocean. No, we're going to say that this is, whose fault is it? Doctors. Why? Who knows? Panel, I think this goes into a level of ludicrous. I mean, this is just in.
So basically, they're blaming the doctors for what happened and not Nick himself. And somewhere in here, there has to be accountability. And here's the thing. Schizophrenia, or whether it's a cluster A version of it, or addiction, or other mental illness. I mean, if you're walking around, I think there has to be an element of accountability in there. Now, if the insanity plea, knowing that you don't understand right from wrong, that's what they're going to go for here, right? But I think it's this lack of accountability that contributed to this whole mess. Now, that's not blaming his parents. It's not blaming his siblings. But I do think it contributed. I do think it contributed to what happened here. And if Nick's unwilling to do something for himself, it becomes really difficult to help someone in that spot. It just does. And sure, Schizophrenia might have played a part, but we don't know if he truly was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The undisclosed source told that to TMZ. Who is the undisclosed source? We don't know. My guess would be it's the defense team, Alan Jackson, but that's not confirmed. So until we hear what the doctors say, until we see what the toxicology report is, we just don't know. We just don't know. So to clear up more of the confusion, I talked about schizotypical and schizoaffective. This is what schizophrenia is. Schizophrenia is a severe chronic brain disorder causing people to interpret reality abnormally, leading to symptoms like hallucinations, hearing voices, delusions, false beliefs, disorganized thinking/speech, unusual behavior, and reduced emotional expression. It disrupts daily life, making school, work, and social interactions difficult, but consistent treatment with medication and therapy helps manage symptoms, allowing for fulfilling lives. Now, here's the thing. If that's what you have, but you're continuously using drugs like weed or heroin, crack, or meth, that in no way helps your mental health. And again, if you are aware that you have schizophrenia, then to me, it's treatable if you get on the right meds. If you take meds, it is treatable. But you are doing yourself and everyone else a disservice to be using all of those hardcore drugs, because if anything, it's going to make it worse. There needs to be responsibility in there somewhere.
Saying to me that we're going to blame doctors for this. This guy, if he actually had the wherewithal to go to a hotel afterwards, book a hotel room and go watch the sunrise or whatever after the whatever happened that night, I'm sorry. This is too much. This guy, it's on him if he did it. The insanity plea, I think, is going to be very difficult. But this one gets me a little angry, so I'll just hand it to you guys so I don't slip up and say something I shouldn't. But I don't want to blame. I don't want to blame anybody other than the guy who caused his parents to suffer for minutes before they were out.
For the crime itself, I agree with you, right? Like, there's a lot of factors to this. Now, what I disagree with is the framing of this conversation, because I do feel there is a broader conversation to be had here about the state of mental health in this country, right? Because we've been talking about it our years. Yes. Yeah. Like, the problem with a lot of this is a lot of it isn't healthcare anymore. It's an affirmation, right? People go in and they just get told what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And that's a fair point in some cases. There are some therapists, they do give a lot of validation, and validation alone, as I always say, it's not sufficient. You do have to build rapport with your clients, encourage them, support them, and there's going to be some validation in that. But I think it's a mistake to validate every single thing. There comes a point where you shouldn't be validating things that can hurt your client or things that are keeping them stuck, in my opinion. You want to gently support them and guide them into growth. And that's not always validation. Sometimes it's encouragement. Sometimes it's trying to show them the way. And this is something that some therapists don't really feel comfortable with. This is more in the alley of coaching sometimes. But I do think any good therapy will also involve a bit of coaching as well, if you ask me. That's just my opinion.
Actually gets done. So there is an argument to be made here as to why, like, maybe the doctors did fail this individual as far as seeing that there is a bigger problem in place here, that he probably should have been put in some sort of treatment sooner. Now, I'm not going to disagree with that argument there.
We need to be able to commit people, Tom. That's the problem here. What they want to do is they want to blame the doctors now instead of, we've coddled this. Like, if somebody actually scares you and your parents and your family for however long, we need to have a way to say, no, you need to be held for a while. Like, put some restraints on it so we don't go crazy. But there doesn't seem to be a way to do that. Right. At least of which in California.
I totally agree with that, actually. I totally agree. There has to be a way where you can commit people against their will if it's in the best interest of the public and that person's family and even themselves. Now, committing them against their will doesn't mean it's permanent. I think that's a good clarification. It's not always going to be permanent, But I think it does need to be as long as you're still a risk to yourself and others. I think that's true. But if you're in a facility, and say, for sake of argument, he is schizophrenic. So you're in the care of this treatment center, which you can't even do right now in California for longer than 72 hours, which is the problem. But say he was able to be there for months, maybe even a year. He's able to get stabilized on a medicine that works for him. There's doctors and other people around to observe him and monitor him. And then at this point, he's not using any other illegal drugs at this point. He's under their care so they can get his mental health in order. And then he can be released, hopefully, at a point, as long as his mental health is in order. And he could be then a productive member of society. Now, this all goes out the window, though, if he gets stabilized, does all of that, and then you just go right back to using. And then all the work that you did is undone. So again, that's where the continuing recovery part comes into play, whether it's a 12-step program or something. I don't care how you do it, as long as you do it. And I think that's what I would have liked to have seen happen. But in California, I guess there isn't really a way for that to happen.
Anybody who's a parent knows, especially if you have adult children, there's only so much you can do to help them, right? Like at a certain point, you can't keep pushing because they're an adult. They're going to do what they want to do, and you legally have no bounds or boundary to work from. And at this point, it's like, what do you do as a parent? Like I understand where you know the Reiners didn't want to give up on their son. Obviously, you wouldn't want to as a parent either. But this whole argument of, you know, we don't want this to happen again, you know, it's a failure of the system, that has nothing to do with the crime that's already been committed. The crime itself and what maybe led up to the crime, to me, at this point, are two completely different things, right? Like we can have a different conversation on the other side here of, you know, the lack of mental health or, you know, the fact that there's too much of this affirmation going on in mental health right now to where people aren't getting committed or getting the help they need. And I can say this even from personal experience with people in my family and other places where I've seen this shit. I'm sitting here going, how is this person not in a facility? Right. And a lot of times what happens is a lot of these facilities will just turn people away in a sense of, oh, no, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. It's like bullshit. Sorry for the S word, but yes, there is something wrong with this person and they need help. And you just continuing to tell them that they're fine and they're okay and there's nothing wrong with them is a problem. Now, sitting here and trying to blame that his parents' success and all this other crap and all these other things that are causing him mental issues. Look, sorry, you need to grow up at some point, right? Like the kid needed therapy to get it through this stuff. And maybe his parents should have shut the door on him sooner. I hate to say it. Maybe they should have said, look, we've done all we can. We can't coddle you anymore, Nick. It's time for you to grow up and figure this out on your own.
I totally agree with that too. I think there comes a point when if he's not going to do what's best for himself, you got to protect yourself. And that's not being brutal. It's just having the wisdom to not make the same mistakes over and over again. That's the definition of insanity. What's insanity? Repeating the same things over and over again and expecting a different result. So if what you're doing is not working, you got to try something different. So maybe not letting him stay in the guest house, maybe only giving him a bare minimum of things until he can get on his own 2 feet. Now, how do I know about this? Someone asked in the chat. I did work for, I won't say the place, but it was a drug and alcohol treatment center for teens. It was also a behavioral community. And I went to school for addictions counseling, went to school for mental health counseling. And I think I'm uniquely qualified to talk about some of it because I have personal experience with addiction. I have personal experience with mood disorders and mental illness. I myself was put into double trouble groups. I myself was given antipsychotic medication, Geodon, Zyprexa, Seroquel. So I know a lot about this stuff. So that's why it's of interest to me. I know a lot about it. And I've seen how treatment goes. And I've seen the people that do well. And I've seen the people that don't do well. And usually both of them leave clues. The people that do well, they have the willingness to try. And they take suggestions. They get honest. And they have humility. And they follow through. The people that don't do well, they don't stay clean. They don't do what's necessary. They continue lying, manipulating, and deceiving. And they get bad results. That's what I have seen.
We've done everything we can, but as a parent, I understand where it's difficult to do that, right? So at the same time, what does that have anything to do with any of this other crap? Nothing. The man committed a horrific crime at the end of the day, and he needs to go on trial for that. And it's up to the jury and everybody else involved with the trial to figure out what happens to Nick at the end of the day, right? Like, I get the family also saying, like, another death is not going to make this go away. It's not going to make it any better. And that's usually what happens. I've seen this, I don't know how many times, in a case like this where you have a family member who commits this kind of a crime, where the rest of the family, and surprising to anybody else who's not involved, going, why would you not want them to be punished by death or have some horrible, because all it's going to do is just cause even more hurt and harm to the family as an overall thing. But at the end of the day, look, they lost Nick anyway, right? So
That's
what
right.
are you going to do at this point, right? Like, to me, making this big deal about it in the public, what is it going to do for your, cause at the end of the day? It's not going to help Nick at all.
Right. And the argument here, Tom, is, that this guy who breaks into their bedroom in the middle of the night and ends them in a way that causes agony and is not immediate, and does it to his elderly parents who can't defend themselves, who have to know that the other person is also going through the same thing. Like, this is the worst possible way. And for him to do that and then go check himself into a hotel, right? This guy can't ever be allowed to be out again if he did it. Okay? He can't ever, because if you'll do that to your parents, why would you not do it to anybody else? That's your parents. And the excuse for this is, well, his parents were it was hard to be born into a family that was so darn successful. Well, try the opposite sometime and see how that goes. Culture, Lauren, your thoughts on this one?
And I agree with that. You can't let him do this kind of thing again. Right? His life now is pretty much over. The best case for him is he gets a mental health hospital for several decades and maybe gets released, like the guy who tried to assassinate Reagan. Maybe that's the best case for him. And again, it seems like his family, they kind of have more of this like very lenient, forgiving mindset with it. Him having the death penalty wouldn't help anything. They probably think of the old, the eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, Gandhi quote. But in this case, I mean, I get it. I get why they would say that. I'm like, he's not going to get the death penalty anyway. Like, to me, it's not going to be on the table. I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if that even became like a relevant possibility.
Where does the blame lie? Can they come up with this defense of saying, as a family, it's the doctors, it's the doctors, it's the doctors? He says.
I think that again, not placing the responsibility on the person who committed the act is a huge problem. I think not recognizing that the lack of follow through by the entire family when it came to him getting the help he needed is an entirely other conversation. If they want to play the blame game, then they're certainly, you can't level it at a medical industry that they've helped shape through their politics over the course of the last decade. Because as Tom suggested, I agree. I mean, we no longer have healthcare; we have affirmation care, and we no longer are dealing with the actual facts of any given situation. Because had at the moment of this particular encounter, he had been sent to a medical facility, which is where he needed to be when he decided to go off the reservation, we probably would not have ended up with this outcome. And again, this comes down to some culpability that we tried to talk about once before. And I was saying, who is actually really responsible here? Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, it was up to Nick. If Nick really wanted help, the opportunity was afforded him on multiple occasions. If people in his family were genuinely concerned at that time, they would have followed through and followed up to make sure that that help was provided. Look, I'm going to say it this way. If they really genuinely don't want this to happen again, he needs to be either imprisoned for the rest of his life, or, some other outcome that makes it so that he never enters society again. Because as much as mental illness is a societal issue, Tom already mentioned, and I agree, there's only so much you can do as a member of society, or even a family member, that could be enforceable in any way. Nobody bothered to secure his presence in a place where he couldn't do anybody any harm, and ultimately they have some culpability. So does the family have some? Maybe they don't see it that way, but I do.
Well,
I mean,
I want to be careful, culture, and
yeah.
Everybody.
And again, I think culpability is the right word. I'm not going to blame them, but I think they could have done a little more. That's not blame. I think that's just accurately saying that if what is going on isn't working, you got to try to do something different. And again, when there's mental health, personality disorders, and addiction all involved, and in this case, all of those can be involved: addiction, mental health, personality disorders. There's a debate whether you consider like narcissism mental health or mental illness. There's a debate on that. But if they're all three, right, you have to take one at a time. And usually people will say, you got to at least try to stop using so you can figure out what really is going on. If you truly do have a mental illness you need medicine for, or maybe you just stop using drugs and a lot of those mental health symptoms go away. You don't know. You don't know until you get clean. The problem is that getting clean part is extremely difficult. So maybe they'll give them some antipsychotic medications or a mood stabilizer to at least try to get them to the next phase. Okay, I stabilized them. Now they're off the drug. And now you can see, okay, as long as you're clean, now you got to see how you handle recovery. How do you handle your mental health now? But so much of this requires them to be clean first. If they're not clean, it's all going to be a crapshoot. And every other thing you try to do to help someone that has severe mental illness or a personality disorder, if they're still using, it's just going to sabotage everything. It makes it so much more difficult.
Is going to have their opinions about this because when there's a catastrophe like this, we want to figure out how we could have prevented it, right? Or what could be done to not allow this to happen again. I have real sympathy for the family. I also am open to finding out where the facts lead us in terms of, and that's the thing. It's going to get ugly.
But it's not
the skeletons are going to come out of the closet in the trial.
But and that's the problem, right? We already kind of have some of the skeletons already out there because we already have fingers being pointed at, particular redheaded comedians that, may have been
I'm sure
involved in a conversation.
I'm sure he's going to have to give a testimony as to what happened.
So I when I'm looking at it, I have to look at all aspects of this, and from what we have so far, and again, I agree with you. We don't have all the information as of yet. There's going to be a lot of people that could be held to account. This isn't an Amber Heard situation. Okay. This is something that, there definitively was something done by one person to other people and should never be allowed again. So in that way, I agree with the family. Let's never have this happen again. Do you know how you solve that? You just assure that he never makes it back into society. Problem solved.
I agree mostly with Tom and culture, but I would make one important distinction. This is a tragedy, no matter how you look at it. It's a tragedy for the Reiners who are no longer with us. It's a tragedy for Nick. It's a tragedy for his family. It is not surprising that they would want the public to be merciful because this is their brother, nephew, member of the family. But laws are for society. They're not for the family members. They are to make sure that we can live in a civil society together. And when you are administering justice, mercy is supposed to be a component, but you're not supposed to make those decisions emotionally. You are supposed to make them based on the law and for society so that the mass of people is protected. And in this case, one person is responsible for this crime. He had multiple attempts at rehabilitation that in the article itself, and apparently according to people on background, they're saying he didn't take seriously. That makes it his responsibility and his alone. And as much as people may have wanted to help him, as much as people tried to help him, he did not improve. And he made an irrevocable choice, took his parents' lives, allegedly, and now he has to be responsible for that crime. There is no way to say that this can never happen again without ensuring that it never happens again. And that's why you have the law and justice to be that dispassionate judge and to determine, is rehabilitation possible here? He's already attempted rehabilitation several times. At this point, he's given all the evidence that he needs to give to show that that's not a viable option. If you're serious about making sure this does not happen again from this individual.
So clearly it shouldn't happen again from this individual. He should probably be locked away for the rest of his life. The only variable is in a mental hospital or jail. That's what I would say. But what can be talked about in terms of just the public in general is, will this be a case that can kind of push different laws to be made about, can you commit someone against their will? And it might be more of a state by state thing, but I think that's something that can come out of this case. Okay, we saw what happened to Rob Reiner and his wife, and we saw what happened in North Carolina on that train. Maybe there needs to be something in place, and maybe the states should push for this so that if they think someone's out there that is severely mentally ill and could possibly be dangerous, yeah, get them off the streets. And maybe there needs to be some laws passed that can allow that to happen against someone's will.
There's only one way to effectuate that outcome.
Pulling Holly Weird to the sensible center, the mainstream middle where money is made is not easy, but folks, you make it easy to make videos each and every day because sharing time with you is a great honor, and we never.
Oh, that was it. This is a good channel, though. I like them. WDW Pro is what they're called. The next one's going to be Profiling Evil.
Want to explore the complex and well, in the wake of the tragic killing of Rob and Michelle Reiner, new media reports are adding detail to how their son, Nick Reiner, behaved after the murders, what investigators allege about his post-crime choices, and how those behaviors kind of intersect with claims of schizophrenia and substance abuse history. So let's explore Reiner's documented actions, like checking into that hotel, avoiding immediate contact with police, and how these decisions, when combined with established legal observations, might suggest there was awareness and a decision to evade responsibility. What's the broader context of mental health and addiction? And what are the media outlets reporting on these kinds of issues? And finally, how do they not explain the choice to commit a double homicide? Well, hi, folks, and welcome to Profiling Evil, and thanks for taking a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, and please give the video a thumbs up. You know, your simple act of doing so really helps us get discovered, and it keeps us growing. So don't forget, ring that bell. Murders, and they're giving some detail of how investigators tracked down Reiner's son, Nick. What was this guy doing in the hours that followed the murders? And how might those actions reflect his potential awareness of the crime, possible intent, and suggestions of attempts to avoid police contact. Now, I also want to explore the complex and sensitive nature of mental health and substance abuse history. It's now part of the public discussion. So the question is going to become, do those factors intersect with legal responsibility? And here's the latest information that I've been able to find on the case in the deaths of Rob and Michelle Reiner, happening on December 14th, 2025. Now, after their deaths were discovered, their son, Nick Reiner, who's 32 years old and has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for allegedly stabbing his parents in their Los Angeles home, Nick Reiner has now obtained attorney Alan Jackson to defend him. He made his first court appearance without entering a plea because Jackson was able to postpone that arraignment to January 7th, 2026. So for now, Nick Reiner sits in jail with no bail until the first of the year. Now, already, this defendant's mental health treatment is taking center stage with multiple media outlets who are reporting that Nick has been diagnosed with schizophrenia and that he was under some form of treatment and medication, perhaps medication changes, before the killings. Now, I don't think these are confirmed findings, and a sealed medical order related to his mental health conditioning actually could delay proceedings. The Reiner children issued statements mourning their parents' death while asking the public to afford them a level of privacy and compassion. Frankly, it's not happening. As friends, associates, and partygoers, and many others are speculating about what was going on behind the scenes in the hours leading up to the Reiner murders. All of these developments provide the framework for understanding the case from a legal standpoint. But I want to start exploring this instead from a behavioral perspective. So let's get back to the Reiner case, because the timeline after the killings might be the most revealing part of this story. And to start, I want to review that timeline and the post-crime movements, because in my opinion, the timeline immediately after the killings might help us understand criminal responsibility, and at least.
And I'm glad he's going over this. I think this is important to know the timeline and help put pieces of the puzzle together. And part of the timeline is Rob asking Conan, can I bring my son Nick to the party? And again, if there's any kinds of mental health issues, addiction issues going on at that very moment, and they're afraid to leave him home alone, what are they doing bringing him to a party? What do they do? What that was just such a poor choice. And especially since we already know what happened, hindsight's 2020, but it just seems like a really poor choice to do that.
Some awareness of the crime. Now, from the public record, from ABC 7 reporting, and from law enforcement sources, we're getting suggestions of the following sequence: that sometime in the early morning hours of Sunday, December 14th, prosecutors are alleging that Nick Reiner stabbed his parents inside their Brentwood home. Now, this is really important because according to ABC 7, that places Nick Reiner at the home and as the alleged suspect. He checked into the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica, a place that's located quite a few miles away from the crime scene, either late Saturday night or early Sunday morning after the murders occurred. Now, it's been reported that law enforcement officers have searched that hotel room for evidence, although whatever was recovered remains a mystery. But on the afternoon of December 14th, the Reiner's daughter reportedly discovered the bodies of her parents after their massage therapist reached out to her, complaining that she couldn't get into the house for a scheduled massage she had with the couple. By 7 p.m. that evening, police had located Nick Reiner through digital geolocation and through some surveillance, and they took him into custody after he left a hotel, left the gas station that he visited, and was approaching a bus stop. That arrest was captured on video and shows Reiner immediately complying with officers who ordered him to the ground, taking him into custody. And all of this occurred near the Exposition Park area. So with this information in mind, I'd like to explore what Nick Reiner's actions might suggest, primarily awareness and avoidance. And again, this is speculation based on my own observations of what's publicly being reported. It appears that some of Reiner's behaviors after the murders raised important questions about his awareness and his understanding of the crime, and perhaps his potential intent to evade police. These two factors alone could point to criminal responsibility, assuming that Reiner was in the Brentwood home at the time of the killings. Now, if Reiner checked into the Pierside Hotel before the murders occurred, my immediate question is why? I mean, was this normal behavior for him to leave his free guest room quarters at the Reiner residence and go out and pay for a hotel room a distance away? And if that's normal, why was it normal? And are there some examples that would support that this was normal?
And like the FBI guy said the other day, could having that hotel room, ordering that hotel room, could that signal intent there? Okay, I realize I'm going to do something and I'm not going to stay at the scene of the crime. So I'm going to go to this hotel instead.
Because if it's not normal behavior, the question becomes, why did he do it? If he checked into that hotel after the murders occurred, that too is incredibly intriguing and leaves me asking why, especially if he was aware of the murders and is forensically proven to have been in the home at the time of the homicides. Now, some people are suggesting that the defense might be gearing up to say that Nick Reiner was guilty of this crime, but that he's mentally insane and shouldn't be held accountable. Well, that might be the case, but it's not something that's come out yet, and it's speculation. But regardless, here are some immediate questions I have regarding that kind of a theory. First and foremost, again, I think it's too early to say that this is going to be his defense, although it certainly appears possible. Now, many people are pointing to his reported medical finding of having schizophrenia. Again, I'm not sure if that's been proven accurate. It might be. But even with those two possible scenarios entering the picture, I want to kind of shade away and talk about some of the behaviors that are sticking out to me that cause me to wonder if all of this is true and if Nick Reiner caused the death of his parents, how aware he may have been that what he was doing was either right or wrong.
And I'm glad he mentioned that the schizophrenia diagnosis is not confirmed. It's only been leaked to TMZ. We don't know who leaked it to TMZ. We don't know who their source is. My guess would be it's Alan Jackson and Nick Reiner's defense team that was retained by the Reiner family. That would be my guess. But I would like to know what doctor diagnosed him with that, when he was diagnosed with that, what medications he was given for that. Was he med compliant? What was that toxicology report when he was arrested? Those were all the very pertinent questions I would want to know.
So let's start with the aftermath of the murder. If Nick Reiner were at the home at the time of the murders and either discovered their bodies or committed the crime, but didn't think it was wrong, wouldn't he be the first person to dial 911 and ask for help or report it? But instead of calling 911 from the scene or even remaining at his parents' home, if he was there, the reports I'm reading suggest that he left the property and either returned to or checked in to the Pierside Hotel. Now, this is really significant in my opinion because it implies a choice to distance himself from the crime scene. And I think it indicates a level of awareness of having done something that's serious enough to avoid the immediate aftermath. And in my opinion, when somebody commits a violent act while confused, delusional, psychotic, they would probably immediately seek help or express concern for the victims. And that can be interpreted differently than somebody who takes deliberate steps to separate themselves from the aftermath. And reportedly, Nick Reiner left the Reiner home, left the guest house where he'd been staying for free, and he headed to the hotel some distance away. He didn't go to police. He didn't seek refuge with known family members. Instead, he continued moving around Los Angeles until authorities located him in the evening hours on the day the Reiners were discovered deceased in their bedroom. Now, this pattern of leaving the scene, of seeking out a hotel, and then not contacting law enforcement voluntarily seems to fit a pattern of avoidance. And if he knew that the murders had already occurred, and that's something that TMZ reported, then this is even more disturbing, because TMZ said that when he was arrested, he was described as being calm, but in a fog. Now, this description doesn't prove anything, nor does it negate awareness, but it's incredibly interesting. The investigators in the case, along with the prosecutors, are undoubtedly going to assess both Nick Reiner's outward demeanor and his contextual choices. Things like that hotel lodging, the distance from the crime scene, the lack of notification of the murders, perhaps even statements or admissions that were made at the time of his arrest. You know, there was a dope.
And well, before he gets into this, I agree with what he's saying here, that I tend to believe he knew. I don't think he was in a psychotic state. His actions show he was aware. He knew right from wrong. He didn't didn't call the police or anything. So to me, that's not looking good for the insanity defense, in my opinion.
Podcast interview that I referenced earlier, and Reiner spoke about how his parents repeatedly rescued him. Listen for these quotes for things like, "I was owing dealers money, and my family came and rescued me," and they forced him into treatment. In my opinion, this language matters because Nick constantly frames parental intervention as a rescue, an extraction, or a safety net. There's not been any discussion I'm aware of consequences or accountability or boundaries. It's almost as if there was always a chance that somebody else would clean up whatever mess he got himself into. Let's listen to that.
She ended up freaking out, flew home by herself.
This is the garbage bag full of cocaine time?
No, this is way before that. Oh, no, this is way after that. I'm sorry, this is way after that. And so anyways, I ended up owing all this money and being on a different island, and my family came and rescued me. And then
that was a great story.
They forced me to go into treatment, right?
You know, these segments don't prove guilt. They don't diagnose, nor do they predict homicide. But they do undermine claims of total incapacity. They support awareness of consequences, and they seem to align with post-crime avoidance behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, all of his actions and all the interviews that he's done, I don't think he's going to be able to get away with insanity. And the only thing they can try to say is, and this is why they're saying the medication thing, the medication made him out of his mind. They're going to try to say it was a temporary insanity, probably from medication or having the wrong medication or medication withdrawal. That seems to me the avenue they're going to try to do. And again, they're doing their jobs, right? Their jobs is to try to get him the most favorable outcome. I don't think they're going to be able to do it because I don't buy it. I don't buy the temporary. For what we know right now, I don't buy it.
So I'd recommend going over to that Dopey podcast and some of the Nick and Rob Reiner interviews that are being posted online to get a sense of how the family interacted. I personally really liked the discussion on the interview panel. So let's talk a little bit about mental health, addiction, and responsibility. This case exists at an intersection of mental health claims and criminal law, which always becomes a really complicated landscape. Now, again, there are suggestions that there's documented schizophrenia treatment that was ongoing. And some media outlets are reporting that their sources have direct knowledge, confirming that Nick was being treated for schizophrenia at the time of the killings. Other sources, backed by historical statements and podcasts and videos, document and support that Nick Reiner had a long-term drug addiction history, with reports saying that his drug abuse included heroin, and it was backed by periods of homelessness.
I definitely buy the addiction story. I definitely buy that aspect of it. From what he said on Dopey, the 18 rehabs. To me, that's one of the things that I'm very confident believing. Yes, he was certainly an addict. What is not for certain is what his diagnoses were, if he had a personality disorder or not. Those are things that are not certain. I tend to believe more of a personality disorder, in my opinion.
In many criminal cases, schizophrenia and a history of significant substance abuse are factors that require careful evaluation, and this is no exception. If mental illness or drug addiction plays a legal role in this case, the bigger question is going to become whether Nick Reiner knew that murdering somebody was wrong. That's a really hard one for us to wrap our minds around, because we want to err on the side of morality, which says, of course, it's wrong. But one of the most critical issues in criminal law is understanding whether right and wrong was understood at the time the act was committed. These claims of schizophrenia or psychosis might be raised by the defense, especially if the defense is going to try the not guilty by reason of insanity plea. But there's got to be documented impairment in the suspect's understanding of reality, and legal consequences for that have to fly. Again, I find it troubling that Reiner didn't call 911 immediately, because if he was aware of the homicides or didn't return calls after family members notified them of their parents' deaths, including up to 6 hours before he was arrested, Nick Reiner's going to have to explain why he chose to distance himself from the murder scene by leaving and checking into a hotel instead of staying at the residence where he'd been living. And he could plausibly argue that they had the argument at Conan O'Brien's family's home. He left and he was so angry he wasn't going to stay. But keep in mind, he was living in an outbuilding, a guest house at the residence. He's going to have to explain why he avoided law enforcement until he was tracked down, because all of these behaviors are things that prosecutors are going to argue show awareness that what he was doing was wrong, that it was criminal, even if mental illness was affecting his judgment. We theorized, based on limited amounts of real information that we're receiving about the case, a few things. And as of the latest reporting, there are no verified details in the public domain about the removal of a murder weapon or the disposal of evidence. I can't even find an arrest affidavit online, nor have I found any official court documents. I suspect they're out there and I'm just not finding them. But there have been no media accounts or official statements confirming that the knife alleged to have been used in the murders was concealed or transported elsewhere or even destroyed.
And this is what the DA was talking about. And they talked about this right after it happened. They said they didn't release what the weapon was, where they found it, anything about it. They are saving that for the case. So anything you hear about the weapon is just speculation. Now, they said it was knife wounds, but they didn't say anything about what the knife was, what kind, where it was found. None of that. None of that has been disclosed yet. And the DA said they're saving it for the case.
But what has been confirmed is that a knife-type instrument was used to commit the homicides. We also know that authorities searched that hotel room where Nick stayed after the murders, assumedly searching for evidence. And whether evidence was found, removed, destroyed inside the crime scene or outside of it remains to be seen. So the question becomes, will the ongoing discussions around mental health and drug abuse change anything? And again, I find myself returning back to the behavioral patterns of this crime scene. If it's proven that Nick Reiner was forensically in the room at the time of the murders or immediately after, why avoid law enforcement rather than engage with them? Voluntary engagement with police right after an incident can sometimes indicate remorse or confusion, innocence. Avoidance typically signals awareness of wrongdoing. So the reported path of leaving the property, avoiding relatives, checking into a hotel, not calling 911, it all aligns with avoidance behavior. This idea of choosing to stay in a different part of the city and
Now, here's a good thing to go over. I'm not sure I'll be able to play this, but there was a documented psychopath who was confessing to a murder. And he basically just flat out admitted it with no emotion, with no empathy. And the detective was telling him, "You do understand you just did a terrible thing, right?" And the guy was like, "Yes, sir, I understand." And like he was just so unfazed by the entire thing. And he knew it. He was very aware. It's wild to see. It was wild to see.
hotel to make or not make immediate contact is again delay detection. You know, him being described as calm but in a fog doesn't necessarily indicate anything. A lack of awareness. It doesn't indicate anything along those lines, but it might reflect emotional shutdown, medication effects, or shock even. So police have to consider his choices first and his affect second. And this is where I hope we can figure out, if all of this proves to be true, how to separate the symptoms from accountability. Because when mental illness is part of a public narrative, it is incredibly tempting to let it overshadow other evidence. But responsible analysis has to separate symptom presence from behavioral choices.
That's a great line. That's a great line. So, again, if he knows he's schizophrenic, and we're going to give him, just for sake of argument, let's say he's schizophrenic. If you know that, and then you are knowingly going to use drugs like meth or other drugs on top of that, now, any of that becomes your responsibility now. You know you're schizophrenic, and now you're going to take these drugs that notoriously make schizophrenia worse. That's on you. To me, that has to be on him at that case. Now, the defense team's going to say it wasn't illegal drugs, probably. They'll say it was just they got the meds wrong, or he was on, like, in withdrawal. Now, when you're in withdrawal from mental health meds, it depends, right? It depends on what's going on. In some ways, you can be like extremely unstable. But depending on how the withdrawal impacts you, some people might be like bedridden. Other people could be extremely unpredictable, maybe even violent. It just depends.
So let's talk a little bit about the evidence, the intent, and the consciousness of guilt, because people can be mentally ill and still understand right from wrong. This is one of the most important and frankly most misunderstood ideas in the true crime space. Often when people hear about mental illness, it assumes it automatically means they're not responsible or they didn't know what they were doing. Well, real life isn't that simple. A person can absolutely be mentally ill, diagnosed symptomatically, or even in a crisis, and yet they can still understand the basic difference between right and wrong, or at least understand that certain actions are going to bring police consequence and punishment. So here's what this looks like in plain language from a cop's perspective. Mental illness can affect mood, perception, and impulse control, but it doesn't always erase moral awareness. For example, somebody with depression might feel hopeless and disconnected, but they still know it's wrong to harm somebody.
These are great distinctions here. And I think this is also something other therapists need to hear as well. It's like, okay, these things can be true, but it doesn't mean you don't understand right from wrong anymore. It doesn't mean you can't be called out. It doesn't mean you just need to validate everything they say. I think this is essential. This is bridging the gap between, okay, we understand what's going on here, but we still got to try to do better. We still got to know, okay, we're responsible for our life. We are responsible for our actions, and we are responsible for taking care of our mental health problems if we have them. Bottom line.
Somebody with bipolar disorder might be reckless in a manic phase, but still recognize that violence is illegal. Even somebody with schizophrenia might be hearing voices or holding delusional beliefs, yet still oftentimes they understand that if I do this, I'm going to get into trouble, or people are going to think this is wrong. So diagnoses don't automatically equal no understanding. The question becomes what was happening in the person's mind at the moment and whether their symptoms destroyed their ability to recognize the wrongfulness of their actions. In investigations, I often look at behavior that suggests there's awareness, because awareness tends to show up in choices. Things like trying to avoid being seen, or leaving the crime scene, hiding objects and evidence, changing clothes, lying, disabling phones, refusing to call 911, or going somewhere else to blend in. These are the behaviors of someone who understands they've done something that will be condemned and possibly prosecuted. Now, that doesn't prove sanity by itself, but it's the kind of pattern that prosecutors point to when they're arguing these consciousness of guilt arguments. To illustrate some of this, I want to go back to
And he's absolutely right about this. All of those things, to me, lead me to believe he knows right from wrong, and he knows exactly what he did. So much of what anyone who has committed a crime will do is what Dr. George Simon would call accountability avoidance. They're going to say anything they can to avoid accountability. That's the bottom line. And there are people who know that, and there's people that don't know that. And the people that don't know that, they're a little bit more naive. And there are some therapists and doctors that fall under that little bit naive category. Rob Reiner himself might have been under that a little bit naive category. But if you had a Dr. George Simon on the case, you see some of this stuff, or someone like me who understands active addiction, I would be like, no, you're BSing. You can't BS a BSer, as they say. And you're just doing what you want to do to continue using and to continue getting your $10,000 a month for nothing. And you'll say all sorts of things to get off the hook, right? You'll say whatever it takes. And some people don't want to believe that about their kids, or anyone for that matter. They don't want to believe the lengths that people will go to lie, manipulate, and to continue getting what they want. And it's the same thing with narcissism too. Some people don't want to believe that people will do everything that a narcissist will do. They don't want to believe they can be that abusive. They don't want to believe they can be that remorseless. They don't want to believe they can be that exploitative and selfish, but they absolutely can. And it's a mistake to think otherwise.
clip from the Dopey podcast and Nick Reiner's interview before these murders occurred. I want you to listen for comments like, I'm not going to be a quote unquote sober guy, or I would go on these talk shows, do the job, and then afterwards enjoy a joint. Well, to me, this is one of the most behaviorally predictive segments of the entire compilation. Nick is openly acknowledging that he understands what the expectation is, that he understands what the rules are, and yet he chooses a workaround to manage appearance, not behavior. And again, from a cop's perspective, this is selective. And the
impression management is what I would consider that. When you're doing things for the appearance and the image, we know that's what narcissists do and other abusers do, all for the image. Everything a narcissist does is about power, control, managing their image, narcissistic supply, and avoiding accountability. If their behavior makes sense once you put it through that lens, it's a good indicator you're probably dealing with some cluster B action there. And when you put Nick Reiner's behavior through that lens, does it make sense? Yeah, it does.
Same structure shows up later when he leaves the crime scene, if in fact he did, doesn't call 911, if in fact he didn't, or he goes to a hotel. It doesn't seem like confusion, but it appears a whole lot more like conditional obedience. So let's listen to that segment on the Dopey podcast.
I said to them, listen, I'm not in the position to do this. I'm not a quote unquote sober guy. I'm going to have to go on to these talk shows. They said, you got to do it. They want the whole father-son angle. It just shows you how disgusting the
Of course.
I mean, just the story out there. So I just went out there and I just realized, look, I have a voice to some degree. I'm going to say what I got to say while I'm here.
At least you didn't sell out. You know what I mean? You stuck to your guns.
Yeah, I'm not going to, no. Yeah.
But you would say, you were like, I'm sober today. You were like, you didn't want to like get into the water, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure it put you in a really bad spot.
It did. It was hard.
Was it really uncomfortable?
Yeah. It was uncomfortable, but I felt like it was like part of the job, part of what I had to do.
It was the job. Let me ask you a question. You don't have to answer.
No, I like where you're going.
Would you like get high afterwards, after the appearance?
Yeah, I would. I'd smoke a joint on the roof of my apartment.
Let me ask you something else.
Please answer the question.
And in a very hard, hard to be this honest, but right? I mean, yeah, I would not ever go on to these things like, coked up or anything like that. I try to be straight, use the appearance as my motivation to be straight, do as best I could on it, and then afterwards enjoy a joint.
Well, on the flip,
And again, a lot of times with addicts and cluster B folks, there might be sometimes internal or external compliance, but internal defiance. So it might seem like they're going along with things, but they're really just kind of just going along with it. So ultimately, they can do the long con and do what they want. And it seems like that's what Nick was doing here. He's like, oh yeah, I'll play along. I'll externally comply. But internally, I am certainly not on your same page here. And he even said, I feel a little uncomfortable being this honest about it. What does that communicate? Communicates he's used to lying about that. That's what it communicates. It communicates he's used to being being deceitful and manipulating. And then for him to do the old, I'm going to smoke a joint on the way home or whatever, or use later. This was all part of his addiction identity. He wanted to have this bad boy, rebellious addiction identity. Unfortunately for him, he just seemed a little bit too awkward to kind of really pull that off. He's not going to be like a freaking James Dean. Like, nah, he was more like, he had more school shooter vibes than he did James Dean vibes, unfortunately, right? But that bad boy image, it only works if you're a teenager, maybe into your lower 20s. Once you're in your late 20s, early 30s, now you're just a loser. Now you're a loser if that's still your persona. And that's where you need to grow up a little bit. And maybe that's what Nick needed. Maybe Nick needed a stronger masculine figure, not his father, apparently, but somebody else to say, dude, like, you're fucking up here, man. And you got to do better. Like, yeah, I understand you got mental illness. I understand you got an issue with addiction here, but handle it. Handle it. Take responsibility. Make the effort to change. Like, become willing to try to do the next right thing for yourself. And it sounds like it just no one told him that. And maybe doctors did years ago, but those were the very same doctors that Rob decided not to listen to in favor of listening to his son. Poor choice.
flip side, there are cases where somebody stays put. They call 911. They blurt out bizarre explanations consistent with their break from reality, or they act in a way that shows that they truly don't grasp what's happened. These are the cases where mental illness might be much more legally significant. And here's a key distinction. Mental illness may help explain why a person was unstable or paranoid, angry, impulsive, but the law often focuses on what they understood. Did they know the act was wrong? Did they know it was criminal? Did they understand the nature of what they were doing? Because a person can be deeply unwell and still know at a basic level that something is wrong. And then oftentimes still choose to do it anyway. Now, this isn't cruelty. It's just human behavior under pressure, where illness and personality and choices intersect. The drug history complicates judgment, but it doesn't excuse premeditation.
I agree. And all of his behaviors to me look like he knows. He knows, he understands. We're just hearing whatever the defense team wants to throw out there to muddy the waters, to make it seem like he's insane or no longer accountable for his actions. So again, you can't trust what a defense team says, and you can't fault them for it. They're just doing their jobs. Just like the prosecution's doing their job, the defense team's doing their job. It is what it is. Now, you can debate perhaps the morality of a defense lawyer knowingly lying for their client. But I guess if that's a problem for you, you probably don't become a defense lawyer, right?
This idea is critical to understanding how the courts and the investigators and juries eventually will think about this violent crime, especially when they take into consideration substance abuse.
And again, time out. I will go over, I don't know if I can even go over the roasts. People are always asking what happened in Nick's childhood, and they always cite those roasts. But if you listen to those roasts, I think they're 25 years ago now. The jokes are different then. Through a 2025 lens, you would never joke about those things now. But it was a different time then. And Al Franken, everyone was saying Al Franken saying that Rob did this to his son. But that's not what Al Franken even said. Al Franken said that Rob's father did it to him. Everyone leaves that part out, probably intentionally, to lead how people see it. So it's important to go to these sources. It's important to learn firsthand what's actually going on. And Billy Crystal did make a joke about Rob luring kids into vans. That's true. He did make that joke. And is there truth there? I've listened to the whole thing in context. I don't think so. I think they were just busting his balls, but it's hard to say.
History of drug use absolutely complicates judgment. Drugs can lower inhibitions. It can increase impulsivity. It can distort perception and intensify emotions like anger, fear, or paranoia. Somebody who's intoxicated or someone who's withdrawing from drugs or alcohol might act more quickly, less thoughtfully, or with poor emotional control. So from a human standpoint, substance abuse can help explain how a situation spirals faster than it otherwise might. But complication is not the same as an excuse, especially when we're talking about premeditation. And premeditation doesn't require a long, calm plan that's written out in advance. In criminal law, it can be formed in minutes, even seconds, so long as the person has time to reflect, to decide, and then to act. Drugs don't automatically erase that process. A person can be under the influence of drugs, maybe even mental illness, and still make choices. They can still weigh options, and they can decide on a course of action. So courts are going to look for the signs of whether the person formed intent, even briefly, before acting out. And from a cop's view, premeditation often shows up not just before the crime, but all around it. Did the person retrieve a weapon rather than using whatever was available? Did they move from room to room? And did they target specific people? Did they stop and then resume the attack? These pauses and directional choices matter because they suggest thought, even if that thought was distorted or fueled by substance.
And again, the fact that both of his parents were killed, that also leads me to believe premeditated and very deliberate. Like, I think you could have a better case of proving maybe insanity for one person, killing one person, but two? and a little bit of time in between, considering I think I heard the mother was found in the hallway and the daughter found the mother, and then the daughter ran. Romy ran. And then when people came to the house, the cops and ambulance, then they found Rob in the bed and Michelle in the hallway. So 2 different places there. That shows some intentionality too, if you ask me.
So somebody struggling with addiction can still choose when and where to act. They can still decide who to involve and who to avoid. They can still decide what steps to reduce detection or how to flee a scene or try to distance themselves from consequences. These behaviors are consistent with the idea that a person had no control or no understanding. They suggest presence of intent, even if judgment is impaired. Now, another key point we should consider is that voluntary intoxication is not the same as involuntary incapacity. If somebody chooses to use drugs, knowing that those substances could affect their behavior, the law is far less forgiving. Addiction is a real thing and it's powerful, but legally, it doesn't give people permission to commit violence without consequences. It may become part of a mitigation argument at sentencing, but it rarely negates guilt entirely. So when we say drug history complicates judgment, but doesn't excuse premeditation, what we're really saying is this, that substances and substance abuse might help explain why a person acted badly, but they don't erase the responsibility and choice. In violent crimes, especially those involving targeted victims or repeated actions or post-crime avoidance, the presence of drugs doesn't cancel the legal concept. It just has to coexist with it. So before I wrap up this segment on mental health, I want to tell you about my book, Wolves in Sheep's Clothing, because I wrote it for people like you, the true crime enthusiasts.
Wolves in sheep clothing. It sounds a lot like Dr. George Simon's book, In Sheep's Clothing. I wonder if he knew about that. Michael R. King.
And I wrote it to help you better understand predatory behavior, intent, and how offenders think. So if you'd like a copy of that book, you can go to Profiling Evil. If you live in the United States, I'll sign it and ship it to you for free. Otherwise, you can get it anywhere in the world through Amazon or Ingram Spark. Now this idea of schizophrenia treatments can be really confusing at times. So I want to talk about how schizophrenia treatments can stabilize symptoms, or if mismanaged, can exacerbate them. Either way, it's a medical issue, not a legal determination. And this is an important point for us to slow down on, especially in a series like this where we're deliberately separating what explains behavior from what determines criminal responsibility. Schizophrenia treatment, from everything I've been able to research, is fundamentally a medical issue, not a legal verdict. Medications, therapy, supervision, compliance, these things can stabilize symptoms for many people who are dealing with this. When it's working, sufferers might experience fewer hallucinations, less paranoia, improved impulse control, or they may have a stronger grip on reality. And in those circumstances, the person might be able to function day to day in ways that look outwardly normal, even though the underlying diagnosis still exists. But treatments can also go wrong. Medication can be stopped or changed, skipped or misused. Side effects can lead people to discontinue treatment without medical supervision. Substance abuse can interfere with prescribed meds and even make the symptoms worse, leading to agitation, delusions, emotional volatility, or disorganized thinking. All of this is real, and all of it matters when doctors evaluate a patient's mental state. But here's the critical distinction, in my opinion. That's a medical assessment, not a legal conclusion. Courts are not tasked with deciding whether treatment was optimal. They're tasked with deciding whether, at the time of a crime, the defendant understood the nature of what they were doing and whether they knew it was right or wrong.
I like this guy too, by the way. I think this guy is in my top 3 of people I've gone over here. And also, by the way, I invited Dr. Glasner, who I went over last night. I reached out to her to come on the show. Hopefully she agrees.
Those are 2 very specific legal questions. A person can improperly be medicated and even in a psychiatric crisis, but still retain enough understanding to meet the legal threshold for responsibility. So
that's the thing, though, peeps. People that do the recorded videos, I mean, I used to do recorded videos all the time, but they can kind of seem monotonous, I guess, to some people. And a lot of them are reading from a script. They just are. I don't like reading from a script. I like freeballing it. I bore myself if I read from a script. So I say, no, I'm going to go live and I'll freeball the whole thing. Stream of consciousness. But I do also like review. I don't want to say things that are stupid or wrong.
From a law enforcement perspective, schizophrenia becomes legally relevant only when it destroys the ability to distinguish between right and wrong, not merely when it complicates judgment or emotional regulation.
Don't worry, guys. He's gone in 3 minutes.
And I know that that's a high bar. I know, but the presence of hallucinogens or disorganized thought doesn't automatically meet the threshold. There are so many people with schizophrenia that live their entire lives knowing that harming others is wrong, even when they're symptomatic. So this is why the prosecutors and the defense attorneys are going to be focusing on behavior surrounding the criminal act, not just diagnoses or medication histories. It's going to become important that we talk about whether Nick, if he's responsible, planned anything. Did he select the weapon? Did he target specifically? Did he attempt to avoid detection afterward? Did he hide, change locations? These are the behaviors that are going to be used to infer whether he was understanding societal rules and the legal consequences, or whether he was just completely out of it and didn't know what was happening. I guess what I'm really saying is that treatment history might help explain how somebody got to a breaking point, perhaps Nick Reiner, but it doesn't automatically answer whether he's legally accountable. That determination has to be made in court based on evidence, on expert testimony, and the totality of this person's actions, not a diagnosis alone. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with an opportunity for you to enter your comments down below, to give me your thoughts about what the post-crime behavior is whispering to you. How did the stop at the hotel or the potential evasion?
I mean, I like this guy. Maybe I'm more of an old soul, so I don't need like the rapid fire TikTok pace. But I like people like him. I'll listen to history shows as well that a lot of people would consider probably dry, or Dr. Grande. Like, I like all that old school stuff. Or Surviving Narcissism, Dr. Carter. I really liked him too. And he did retire from making new videos.
Of police or the lack of getting help sit with you. I hope you'll enter your comments down below. And while you're there, take a moment to read what other people are saying. And just remember, please be kind and respectful as we learn together. And remember that you can find Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you like to get your true crime out on the go, check out Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. Head over to our website.
All right. That's the end of him. So you guys, would you rather watch an episode of Crime Talk that goes over the case, or we can shift gears and there's a woman that was arrested for DUI in Rhode Island who is a politician. She was a candidate for mayor and she was a candidate for state representative. And you see all of the narcissistic tactics that I talk about that she used in the traffic stop. So Crime Talk or that? Jared Mello has written many books on cults and played a huge part in arresting a huge polygamy child. SA takedown. Yeah, well, he sounds like he'd be a great guest then. A Christmas movie, a Festivus miracle.
And I'm not the girl for that either.
Well, yes, just right over here.
So the backdrop of this is a woman who is trying to be a politician, and she's pulled over for drinking. And you're going to hear all the tactics that I talk about, entitlement, etc. Or should I save this for last and do the crime talk one before this? Maybe I should save this for last. How about that?
Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. We have another great show for you before we head into the Christmas holiday. First, new information regarding the number of police contacts at the Reiner residence and much more. Charges dismissed against a Wisconsin professor in a fatal fire involving a pregnant woman. Someone must have left early for the Christmas holiday at the DA's office. Another reason to fear doctors, a fatal stabbing at a Palm Beach Gardens bookstore claims the life of a 65-year-old woman. Oh, let me guess. You think the guy's crazy that did it? We've got this day in legal history, our legal quote of the day, and our dumb criminal. Let's talk about it.
All right, lawyer.
Good day, everyone. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't, like if you do, leave me a comment below, and hit that little bell for notifications so that you receive notice of any time that we go live or put up new content. And yes, you can check us out on any of your favorite podcasting apps. It is Christmas Eve, so Merry Christmas Eve to everyone. Merry Christmas to everyone tomorrow. We'll have a video that goes up actually tomorrow. I think it's quite good. And I hope you enjoy it. It's our little Christmas gift to you all. We want to thank everyone who has watched over the years, maybe even just recently joined us. We appreciate it. This is fun. We enjoy doing it, but it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for you all. So thank you all very, very much. All right, let's go ahead and open the docket today. And first on the record for December 24th, 2025, let's talk about the number of contacts at the Reiner house over the years. So Los Angeles authorities have disclosed records indicating multiple police visits to the Brentwood residence of filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, over more than a decade prior to their fatal stabbing on December 14th of 2025. So the official Los Angeles Police Department logs indicate at least 6 documented calls for service to the couple's multi-million-dollar property between 2013 and 2019, in addition to the emergency response on the day their bodies were discovered. Now, these incidents encompassed welfare checks, mental health evaluations, and reports of potential domestic disturbances. A law enforcement source familiar with the matter has noted that the frequency of response to the address was noteworthy for the affluent and typically tranquil Brentwood neighborhood. The source emphasized that officers from the West Los Angeles Division had attended the home on several occasions, suggesting ongoing concerns within the household. Nick Reiner, the 32-year-old son of the couple, resided intermittently in a guest house on the property, according to individuals close to the family. He has since been charged with the 2 counts of first-degree murder, including special circumstances for multiple victims and the alleged use of a knife, which is classified as a deadly weapon. If convicted, he obviously faces the possibility of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole and even the death penalty, although that's highly unlikely. Now, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner confirmed that both Rob Reiner, 78, and Michelle Reiner, age 70, died from multiple sharp force injuries inflicted by another person, ruling the deaths as homicides. Their remains were subsequently cremated. Specific prior incidents include a 2017 response classified as an investigation into alleged family violence, for which a formal report was filed. Additional calls involved mental health assessments back in 2019 and a welfare check in earlier years. One 2014 visit addressed a noise complaint that resolved without further action. Now, Nick Reiner appeared in court on December 17th wearing his little protective attire and agreed to postpone his arraignment until January 7th of 2026. He's currently detained without bail. His attorney has urged restraint in public judgment pending full proceedings, and the case continues to develop as investigators are, looking into the circumstances surrounding the deaths. Now, what do we know? Well, we do know that death certificates were provided, and it provides a little more detail into the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner. So the death certificates for Rob Reiner and his wife have confirmed additional specifics regarding their deaths, which occurred on December 14th of this year. Now, these documents issued by the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health state that both individuals succumbed to multiple sharp force injuries inflicted with a knife by another person. The certificates further indicate that the couple died within minutes of sustaining these injuries and that their remains were subsequently cremated at the Mount Sinai mortuary. The ashes were released to their eldest son, Jake Reiner. Now, Rob Reiner and his wife were discovered in the master bedroom of the home on the afternoon of December 14th. Police pronounced Rob deceased at approximately 3:45 p.m.
Thank you so much for this one, love. Enjoying the show? Informative. I really appreciate you. Thank you for all of your support.
And Michelle at 3:46 p.m. Both deaths have been officially classified as homicides. And obviously, Nick Reiner, their son, is the one that has been charged. There's been several reports that indicate that Nick Reiner had a history of mental health challenges, including treatment potentially for schizophrenia, not to mention struggles with substance abuse prior to the incident. Some sources close to the case have noted tension at a holiday gathering attended by the family the night before their deaths. Now, in a statement released by the siblings, Jake and Romy Reiner, the family expressed profound grief. Words cannot even begin to describe the unimaginable pain that we are experiencing every moment of the day. Now, the horrific and devastating loss of our parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner, is something that no one should ever experience. They weren't just our parents. They were our best friends. Now, the siblings requested privacy and urged compassion amid public speculation, emphasizing remembrance of their parents' lives.
And again, that doesn't sound like the kind of parents that strike me as like extremely abusive. Like, yeah, I don't think Rob and his wife handled the situation as good as they could, but I also don't think they were severely narcissistically abusing their kids either. And granted, we don't know what was going on behind closed doors, but I don't think I get that vibe from him. There's other issues, the enabling, the not trusting of professionals in this case, the not being firm enough, but I just don't get that abusive vibe. And those other siblings saying, oh, they're our best friends. Generally, if there's like a severely narcissistic parent, I don't think other siblings would say that. Now, even if they were the golden child would have a lot of conditional love. Like they'd be understanding this is all conditional. If I don't perform or do as they wish and maintain the image, all of that conditional quote unquote love and approval will go away. So that's just an aside about what I think of Rob and his wife. I mean, I know more about Rob than his wife. I don't know too much about his wife, honestly.
And legacy. So there's also some resurfaced podcast confessions that highlight Nick Reiner's long battle with addiction. So in the light of the recent charges against Nick Reiner for the murder of his parents, Interviews from the addiction recovery podcast called Dopey have resurfaced, and they're offering a little bit of a poignant glimpse into his personal struggles. Now, during multiple appearances on Dopey, hosted by Dave Mannheim, Reiner spoke candidly about his experience of substance abuse beginning in his teenage years and said, quote, "I started experimenting around age 14, end quote. And he recounted in one episode, quote, "I brought Xanax and Percocet to a party because, well, that was what I was using at the time. When my parents discovered it, they sent me to my first rehabilitation program," end quote. Now, Reiner described how his addiction escalated quite rapidly. By 18, he had tried heroin, LSD, cocaine, and cannabis. And he detailed sharing a room in rehab with a heroin user who extolled the drug's effects, leading him to experiment with it in later years. In another admission, he revealed smoking crack cocaine at age 15 during an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in Atlanta. Periods of homelessness followed as he resisted treatment, surrounded by individuals who, in his words, quote, "would stop at nothing," end quote, to obtain drugs, which he says desensitized him to the associated dangers. One particularly vivid account involved a destructive episode in 2017 while staying with his parents' guest house. He said, quote, "I completely lost control of stimulants. Probably cocaine mixed with something else," end quote. He said, quote, "I stayed awake for days and began smashing things, the television first, then furniture, and other items until much of the guest house was damaged," end quote. This incident, he noted, resulted in his parents asking him to leave the property. Reiner also reflected on manipulative behavior during treatment. To obtain medications, he once intentionally acted out, saying, quote, "I threw a rock through a large window at a facility so staff would see me as unstable and prescribe me what I wanted," end quote. Despite these challenges, he acknowledged moments of familial support. And during a difficult psychedelic experience, he said, "My father stayed with me for hours, taking me through it calmly." He recalled highlighting the persistent care from his parents and ongoing difficulties. Reiner discussed attending numerous rehabilitation facilities.
And that's interesting. I'd never heard that. So that Nick had a troubling psychedelic experience and his father kind of like was his trip guide for it. What do they call them? Not a shaman. Trip sitter. Is that what it's called? But that seems like a caring thing to do for Rob.
Including a wilderness program in Utah and co-writing the 2015 semi-autographical film Being Charlie with his father, which explored themes of addiction within a family resembling their own. It's kind of a disturbing, dark movie, but I think it's worth watching. All I did was speak into my remote control and it pulled it up, but I think it charged me $2.99. But it's you can see, particularly if you've ever dealt with people with addiction. So it was so predictable, and the lack of success, so predictable. You can send people off to classes all they want, but unless and until somebody's ready to truly change, then they're not going to. But if you've got underlying mental health issues, unless you're going to get the help there as well, you're still going to want to do something to self-medicate. Anyway, these revelations originally shared to promote awareness of recovery. They underscore the profound impact on adolescent substance use on brain development and behavior, as noted by experts on the discussion of addiction. Now, Reiner's father had publicly stated earlier this year that his son had maintained sobriety for over 6 years. Now, the podcast episode provides a raw, personal perspective on a life marked by turmoil, now juxtaposed against the grave allegations following the discovery of his parents' bodies in their Los Angeles home on December 14th. This is a tragedy all around. There are no winners. There's no losers. Justice will never be done. And it certainly probably wouldn't be done for the Reiners. I just couldn't imagine that they would want their son thrown in prison for the rest of their lives, even though that's what the law may require. It's going to be a very interesting case to follow. And obviously we'll bring you all of the new information as it comes about. Next, charges were dismissed against a Wisconsin professor in a fatal fire involving his pregnant girlfriend. That's right. The prosecutors must have left early for the Christmas vacation. So let's go to La Crosse County, Wisconsin, where a judge has dismissed criminal charges against a guy by the name of Matthew R. Sierra, a 38-year-old mechanical design instructor who was accused of killing a pregnant woman and who he shared his extramarital relationship and subsequently ignited her house on fire.
So I guess that's the end of his talk on that case. Interesting. The other things I hadn't heard before about the drug stuff. I don't know if Rob was really letting him do drugs per se. He might have turned a blind eye in some cases. And in other cases with the psychedelic, it probably already occurred. And then maybe he tried to be supportive from there. But you got to think also, this is a very liberal household, right? And very liberal households, especially the households that were brought up with more traditional values, are going to seem out of control, right? Just Hollywood in general, it's going to seem extreme to people that are not used to that kind of thing. And that's why they call it Holly Weird too. It's not a coincidence they call it Holly Weird. Now, the body language guy, he did do one that I haven't gone over yet. So we can watch the body language guy or we can watch Dr. G. I like them. He goes over a lot of the Eric Kirk, Candace Owens action.
Bob Reiner, his 70-year-old wife, Michelle.
Oh, not Dr. Grande. No.
Is he's not going to go. The gruesome murders of Rob Reiner and his wife have shocked not only Hollywood but the whole world. And the case that his son was already charged with their murders, and the circumstances are strange to say the least. And I'm going to explore in this video one of them that makes no sense. In case you don't know, Rob Reiner was a legendary figure in cinema. Well, he was the director of When Harry Met Sally, The Princess Bride, Stand By Me, Misery, A Few Good Men, This Is Spinal Tap. I mean, the guy was a bona fide legend. He was known, on one hand, for being a great director, I have to say. And on the other hand, well, he was well known for being one of Donald Trump's biggest haters. Maybe I will dedicate a video to that. But right now I want to talk about what happened here. And I want to address the fact that that party that they attended the night before at Conan O'Brien, in which there was a discussion, there was a loud discussion. Nick Reiner was behaving really erratically, asking people, "What is your name? What is your last name? Are you famous?" in a really strange way. At the same time, this was a tuxedo level party, and Nick was basically in a hoodie and behaving this way. And they
reminds me of the Lil Wayne Drake song, Hell Yeah, Fucking Right song. Are you high right now? Do you love this shit? Do you ever get nervous? Are you single? That whole, like, he's asking him all those freaking questions like it's that Drake and Lil Wayne song.
Also, they got in an argument, the father and son at the party. It got so bad and loud that someone wanted to call the police to report it. An insider told the Daily Mail Friday. But Conan stepped in and said, "It's my house, my party. I am not calling the police." He talked them out of calling the police. And we know that Nick Reiner just stormed out of the party, not seen again that night. The day after that, on Sunday, it was this massage therapist who went to the Reiner's house. She rang the bell. No, she got no answer. It was really odd. Then she called Rob Reiner's daughter, who lives nearby. She also called her father, her mother, got no response. So she decided to go to the house with a roommate, and that's when she discovered her father's body, which was full of stab wounds. She did not see her mother at that moment, but when they called 911, when they called the police officers, eventually they found Rob Reiner's wife, a body as well. For some reason, they knew almost immediately, or had a suspicion almost immediately, that Nick Reiner had something to do with this. He was apprehended that night without any sort of
This is a good point here, and meds could create the blank look. I've seen it with lots of patients. Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, if someone has the wrong meds, they can certainly look all out of sorts and out of whack. Now, is it always that? No, right? That's one possibility. Another possibility is the illicit drug use. Another possibility is both combined. Another possibility is withdrawal from antipsychotics or SSRIs or SNRIs. And another possibility is just the innate mental illness, if there is one. All sorts of things it could be.
It was not an eventual apprehension. And essentially, they have already confirmed that he was the one. But I want to ask somebody something regarding this. With it reported by TMZ, you know that the things that TMZ reports, we have to take this with a grain of salt. But take a look at this. Nick Reiner had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And the meds that he had been given in the last month had made him really erratic. Meds had made him dangerous. He had recently received care at a Los Angeles-based rehab facility that specializes in mental illness and substance abuse. By the way, on the substance abuse...
And I wonder which one it was. Was it more mental illness he was going for at that time? Or was it more substance abuse he was going for at that time? I'd be curious to know. And it kind of makes a difference to me as well.
Nick Reiner had been in and out of rehab between 17 and 18 times since he was 15 years old. So, yeah, he had a lot of access to drugs and a lot of access that he also stole money from his parents to buy drugs, to escorts, to the whole thing. And I'm going to talk about the guest house in a minute. So we are told that facility where Nick Reiner was being treated charges $70,000 a month. $70,000 a month. And lots of rich, powerful parents send their troubled kids there. Our sources say 3 to 4 weeks before the murders, doctors changed his meds and he became even more erratic. Our sources say doctors were trying to adjust the medications so Nick stabilized, but it wasn't working. The family in general wants to distance from that. Nobody wants to do anything with him. He is being held without bail. And essentially, it seems like, okay, he was the one who did it. But according to this is a high probability that he's not going to go to jail. He should go to an institution. In all cases, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. But my question is, if this facility charged $70,000 a month, we have that. Let's take that with a grain of salt. But let's say that was true for a minute. And Nick Reiner had been in and out of rehab 17 times. And there were all these problems and troubles with, in general, with his behavior. He had destroyed the guest house he was living in at his parents' house more than once. And all these problems and all that Rob Reiner could have done for him in this $70,000 a month facility. My question is, if there are all these problems with him, with Nick Reiner, what was he doing with his parents or at his parents' home? How could they, I mean, Rob Reiner was 77 years old. How could they take care of him 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and pretend to take him to this, I don't know, upscale parties and stuff? I guess that they didn't want to leave him alone at the house. But couldn't a $70,000 a month facility, I don't know, serve as 24/7, I would say surveillance or hold him in the air? It's be some kind of a.
And I wonder how he left that facility too. Did he leave AMA against medical advice? Did they check him out? Like, what happened there? I'm also unclear on that as well. But that also makes a difference. And ultimately, I think he should have been, if it was possible, which it's not in California, but to be committed against his will. I think moving forward, that would be the thing to push for in states moving forward. That, to me, that's one of the things that can save someone's life. In the absence of Nick himself not being willing to try to stop using, in the absence of that, if he's not going to try to stop using, and maybe he's schizophrenic, maybe he has a personality disorder, maybe he's undiagnosed on the spectrum, whatever it is, if you're not willing to do what's best for you, then it's almost like you are leaving people no choice. It's not like he was living a productive life. It's not like he had a job. It's not like he was giving back to the community. He was doing none of that. He was being basically a leech that was given $10,000 a month for nothing and living in the guest house and more than likely using at the time. That was his life. That's a sad existence. It just is.
Rehab hotel. I don't know, tie him to the bed, something like that. I mean, I'm trying to paraphrase here. I don't know what would be the worst in here, but you understand what I'm saying. If this guy was so dangerous in so many ways, and I'm sure that both Rob Reiner and his wife understood how dangerous he was, how come they didn't, I don't know, commit him to somewhere that they could take care of him? Or maybe they didn't want the stigma. Oh, my son is not crazy. He is okay. That could happen. That could be the that would be one of the explanations. They didn't want to say, "Oh, I don't want my people talking about my son being in this." But at the same time, it is my understanding that these facilities have very strict privacy protocols. It is obvious, right? If you're a celebrity, if you're famous, you want to be able to go in and out in a very private way with nobody finding out. If you're there, that should be a possibility. That absolutely should be a possibility. So what I see in this case, what I see is strange in this, which is really tragic, is how come nobody saw that this could have happened. And you see that it's not like Nick Reiner was just shut off in his room, or he nobody saw him. No, he attended parties. He was in public. His father made sure to just take him with him to these parties, or who knows, wherever they went. People must have noticed this, and people must have told Reiner, your son is not well, and much less right now. And so this is hard.
And I would have been curious to ask Rob this. Me personally, as someone who has experience with addiction and mental health issues, I would ask Rob, what is your goal here with how you're trying to help Nick? Like, what do you think is the most favorable outcome here for you? Are you just content with him living in your guest house forever? Is that the goal here? Or like, I'd be curious his thinking and his thought process. I know part of his thought process was to not trust the professionals, but to trust Nick to be the expert on himself. And as I've said before, when it comes to addiction, that is not the right way to go if they are lying and manipulating, which Nick was. So I'll be curious what Rob's thoughts were. And you would also think Rob knows plenty of people in Hollywood that used to struggle with drugs that overcame it. Robert Downey Jr., a great example, right? He had severe issues with addiction and the law, and he overcame it. And now he's a great success story. Bradley Cooper, he used to struggle with alcohol, and now he doesn't. Anthony Hopkins. Now, people were not happy with some of the things Anthony Hopkins said the other day, but he's been sober for decades. So I wonder if that is something Rob even tried, like reaching out to some of the people in the community that maybe Nick would look up to see if they would be willing to like help. Maybe he would say, no, they're not going to help. They got too many other things going on. But you never know. You never know. I mean, Rob had a lot of friends in the Hollywood community, so you never know.
Horrific. And by the way, I might address right now what Trump said. You know that Trump made this Truth Social post, a very damning Truth Social post. People were saying, "Oh, no person in the right is going to say anything bad about Rob Reiner," and Trump went full. He unleashed on the guy. I said that was in bad taste. I still think it was in bad taste. But a lot of people were saying that Trump was justified, quote unquote, on saying that because, the way that Rob Reiner acted so many times. Here, found it. Let me copy and paste this so I can show this to you. I was not expecting to talk about this. Maybe we can address this on this same video. Okay. A very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling, once very talented movie director and comedy star, has passed away, together with his wife, Michelle, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome. As if Trump derangement syndrome, that Rob Reiner definitely had, but it did not kill him directly, but let me talk about that in a minute. Sometimes referred to as TDS, he was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness. And with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before, may Rob and Michelle rest in peace. Well, at least he said rest in peace.
I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey, they called out Trump for this. I mean, Trump, this is a little out of control. But he's like, he can't help himself but to kind of be braggadocious about his accomplishments. I mean, Obama would talk the same way. They always would be the first ones to toot their own horn. But, yeah. I wouldn't have said this if I was Trump. But I'm not Trump.
Yeah, I think it was this in bad taste. But one thing that I did not know, and I found out when I was doing the research of the whole case, is that, the having Trump derangement syndrome for Rob Reiner, it was an understatement. That guy really hated Trump with all his guts. Again, I disagree with this, but I can understand the sentiment behind this. After I know that Rob Reiner was, anti-Trump, but I didn't know the extent of it. Now, having said that, I want to ask you the question, because this is a guy, Rob Reiner was a guy who even under the Obama administration, with the Obama administration, tried to make all sorts of things to make sure that Trump won't become president of the United States. And then he did all his power to make Trump's life as miserable as possible. And yeah, he essentially dedicated the last 10 years of his life to destroy Trump in one way or another. The question that I want to ask you, my lovely body language buddies, is what do you think would have happened? What do you think would have been the outcome if Rob Reiner, instead of spending the last 10 years trying to destroy Trump, maybe he could have been, the usual tweet here and there, activists here and there, video here and there, interview here and there, but dedicate that energy into his family and into his son.
What is this? He's defending Trump with this, which I think he's doing this because that's his audience. His audience, I think, is maybe more right center, so he's trying to give it this favorable thing. Now, can more than one thing be true at the same time? Could Rob Reiner hate Trump and also try to help his family at the same time? He's trying to imply that, it's him caring about Trump that was taking time away from his attention to his family. I think that's an uncharitable way to see it. I think you can be passionate about more than one thing at the same time. I think more than the actual attention and focus is more that Rob was in over his head. He didn't know how to help. And apparently he wasn't willing to talk to the people that understand how to overcome addiction. It's no secret. I mean, there's tons of people in 12-step programs. There's tons of people in Hollywood even that have overcome things. So it's out there. But for some reason, Rob thought he knew better. It doesn't add up to me. It doesn't make sense. That's why I said I would have liked to have talked to him to see what his thinking was.
What do you think would have happened? I mean, it is obvious that this was a strain in his family. It's obvious that this was something that infected his family as well. I was looking at his daughter's Instagram. She was posting we had a nice vacation on such and such. Too bad we have the president that we have. Like I said, what does it have to do with your vacation? How does Trump prevent you from having a vacation? But again, that is insanity. That is beyond the point. Again, I think that maybe this was Rob Reiner trying to avoid a stigma of committing his son to a psych ward, because that's definitely where he belonged. While, he got through all the demons that he had, and they decided to keep him at the guest house. And sadly, this is what happened as a result. But I would like to know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy. Much love and bliss.
Yeah, interesting perspectives there by him. Perspectives that we have not heard before on the channel. Last one. So I haven't seen Dr. G. I have not seen what Dr. G has to say.
For you, what do you think, Nick?
It wasn't very tough.
Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language of Rob Reiner and his son Nick Reiner. Before we get started with this, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were found fatally stabbed on.
Well, last thing about Rob and Trump. Rob certainly hated Trump. Now, I don't know how much actual effort he put into trying to like take him down or quote unquote destroy him. I don't know about what he was even trying to do. Like just tweeting. I don't know. I don't know what else he even did.
December 14th. Their son, Nick Reiner, is the primary suspect and has since been arrested. What's been reported is that Nick Reiner has an extremely extensive history of substance abuse as well as some mental health issues. What we're going to be talking about today is an interview from 2016. Rob Reiner and his son, Nick Reiner, did an interview together. And what we're going to be doing is analyzing some of the body language. So keep in mind, as we look at this, this is not recent. This is from about 9 years ago. All right, let's just jump right in.
What was the toughest for you? What do you think, Nick?
It wasn't very tough. I mean, it was pretty nice experience for me.
And just so you know what this is an AOL Build interview from 2016 where they're interviewing him about the movie Being Charlie, which was loosely based on Nick Reiner's experiences with drugs and so forth.
What was the toughest for you? What do you think, Nick?
It wasn't very tough. I mean, it was pretty nice experience for me. I don't really think it was like tough at all.
Really?
So I think most people would watch this and recognize that he seems a little bit awkward. If you listen closely the way he speaks, he misses certain words, which suggests that he's in the feeling part of his brain. He's probably pretty anxious as he's doing this right now. But he's somebody that we're going to see appears a lot more anxious than Rob Reiner does.
That's a good way to put it, actually. I like that. The feeling part of your brain. And that's something that I can relate to. When I wasn't taking my supplement routine for autism, I had so much physical anxiety, and as he would put it, in the feeling part of my brain, where it makes you more self-centered, like you're more focused on that feeling in you. And when you're more focused on that feeling in you, you are less focused on others. And it's harder for you to have cognitive empathy or empathy at that point. So that's an interesting way to see it. And I think there's some truth in that, because that's one of the things my supplement routine did for me. It got rid of that wall of anxiety that was blinding, and it was all encompassing. But now I can actually speak, and I can be more socially calibrated and not be as awkward. And granted, when I say supplement routine, I'm not talking about like just taking one thing. I take a lot of things because severe issues require drastic solutions. So I don't want to make it seem like, oh yeah, just take like one thing and it'll be different. No, there's a lot that goes into it.
It was like tough at all.
Really?
I mean, of course it was a little bit, but
I mean, we did get into fights over things, but ultimately it forced us to make the film better.
Now, the first thing I want you to pay attention to is the body posture. Look at how Rob Reiner is leaning in subtly. We typically do that when we feel connected to somebody, when we feel close to somebody, if we feel affection for somebody. And as you can see, he's slightly leaning in towards Nick Reiner. He's not leaning away. Leaning away would mean he maybe feels angry or feels upset or feels distant. Now, interestingly, we don't see Nick Reiner leaning towards Rob Reiner, which surprises me a little bit because he seems uncomfortable in this situation. So you would think that he might actually lean in towards Rob Reiner to get some more support because he's his father. Let's go back. We're going to look at a little bit more of this.
To make the film better. I mean, we get into issues, and I would see, he would.
I talk about him being uncomfortable. He's fidgeting with his microphone, doesn't seem really know where to put his eyes. So Nick Reiner seems very uncomfortable in situations like this.
The whole process for me, I can just speak for myself. It did make me understand him a lot more, and I think it made me a better father. Hopefully, it did. I don't know, but I
Rob Reiner's being very emphatic. He really does feel what he's saying. He means what he's saying. He believes that he understands him better, that he's a better father now. Whereas Nick Reiner, as he was saying that, started looking up, started looking around, totally disconnected from it. Typically, what we would expect in a situation like this is that he would be looking at his father, nodding his head in agreement. Typically, in these kinds of situations, that's what we see. We're seeing a total disconnection from the feelings about this, a disconnection from his father in the situation, even though his father's explaining, hey, I understand him better now. So the body language between the two of them is pretty strange, actually.
Him a lot more, and I think it made me a better father. Hopefully it did. I don't know, but I think that.
So as you can see, Nick Reiner was moving his microphone around. I'm going to go back so you can watch that again. But that means he has something to say about this. He has a response to this, but he's not asserting it very dominantly. He's not coming out and saying, hey, I have something I want to say about that, or he's not interrupting his father to say it. He's very subtly doing this, and he may feel very uncomfortable asserting himself. So we're seeing so much discomfort already. Watch this right here.
Make me understand him a lot more, and I think it made me a better father. Hopefully it did. I don't know, but I think that, and you'll see it in the film, what happens is,
that's a good point by someone in the chat. They said that Nick only really lights up when he's talking about drugs. And why would that be? If he has a lot of anxiety and depression normally, and then when he uses, that normal feeling of anxiety and depression goes away, of course, you're really going to look into that. You're really going to enjoy that. And it's going to make you feel passionate. And he even said, yeah, I wanted that to be my identity. So that part tracks. What I would recommend, though, when there's addiction and mental health stuff involved, you got to get the person to a point where they feel like their baseline is acceptable. If they don't feel like their baseline mental health and level of anxiety and depression is manageable, they're constantly going to want to go continue using more because it's the only time they get relief. But if you can get to a good baseline, that's number one. And many years ago, that's what Suboxone did for me at first. I wasn't ready to stop like messing up, but Suboxone was kind of like a stepping stone Band-Aid where I was able to go to the next thing. I wouldn't recommend that as a permanent solution, but it got me to stop messing up, and it made my day-to-day existence not so unbearable where I wanted to jump out of my skin and use all the time. So it got me through college. And that's what I would say someone like Nick needed. You need that baseline, not necessarily Suboxone for him, but something where your baseline is okay, where you can focus on other things in life and focus on your goals and what you want to do. And it doesn't seem like he had that.
You know, if your kid is going through rough.
So right now, everything's saying that Nick Reiner is uncomfortable. Switching hands now with the microphone. He's gripping his chair. He's blinking slowly. We close our eyes when we think about things that we don't like. So it's bringing something up for him that he doesn't like. I don't know if it's that he doesn't like hearing his father talk about this. I don't know if it brings back old memories, but this does not seem to be a pleasant experience for him at all.
What happens is, if your kid is going through rough times, the parent your main job is to keep your child safe. So I would do anything. I felt at a loss. So I would do anything that, as we say in the film, anybody with a desk and a diploma, I would.
You're seeing Rob Reiner put.
So this is what I would say. I would say Nick is completely disconnected from Rob. They don't have a good relationship. Nick feels bitter and resentful towards him. And this is the result. Him appearing covertly disrespectful here, not paying attention to him when he talks, zoning out. And also, it can be the mental illness part can play a part in this as well. But ultimately, they are not on the same page. And he doesn't seem comfortable around his father. Maybe he doesn't think he can truly be himself around his father. There's probably some truth in that too. And just listen to how he speaks. And granted, it's a public appearance, but listen to his tone of voice here versus his tone of voice on the Dopey podcast. Night and day, right? And you could say on the Dopey podcast, maybe there's drugs involved there too, possibly. But he just feels much more comfortable in himself versus how he's speaking here. But let's see what Dr. G says.
But his arm in Nick Reiner's space, he feels close to him. He wants to express this. He really is feeling what he's talking about. And I think that he wants to support his son. I think he feels close in these moments. We're not seeing that reciprocated at all yet.
Listen to them, and the whole idea of tough love, and you have to be a certain way. And it's not my nature. It's not the way I am built, but I went and did that, and I think that.
So much discomfort here. You saw him like he was getting ready to say something and then touched his face. People stroke their face when they're feeling uncomfortable. It's a way to soothe ourselves. So he's having to do a lot to soothe himself right now. And maybe he's someone that doesn't feel comfortable asserting his voice. Maybe he's somebody that feels like everybody talks over him and doesn't realize that he's doing such a minimal job of letting anybody know that he has something to say.
Tough love, and you have to be a certain way. And it's not my nature. It's not the way I am built, but I went and did that, and I think that, at the end of the day, I know.
If he was to expect his father to know that he had something to say, typically what we would do is we would look at somebody else, and if we stare at them, they'll know, hey, he wants to say something. He's not giving off any body language outside of somebody like me who reads body language that he is trying to say something. He's struggling to get it out. Most people aren't going to notice that. And so it's very possible that he's believed for a long time. And once again, this is just a possibility, but it's very possible that he believes that his father ignores him or doesn't listen to him because in his own mind, he's being ignored. It's very possible that there are a lot of very intense feelings that have built up based on things that are not real or rational.
Oh, my child better than an expert does. And I probably should have trusted my own instinct. And that's one of the things I did learn about the whole experience.
I think the bonding came not from the story itself.
I don't think Rob had a good instinct at all in this. And I think some of the results proved it. But granted, he can't make Nick want this, right? He can't make him. But he can have boundaries. And he can be firm. Like, that's not being unloving to do that. That might have been the most loving thing he could have done.
But from the fact that we were working on a movie together and I could see him in I would think in the form that he could express himself the best, which is making movies because he has so much experience. And so
now this is very interesting. He's asserting that his father connected with the movie making part of it, not the fact that it was his story. So he's minimizing the fact that his father was involved in his story. There seems to be, once again, a lot of discomfort here.
Himself the best, which is making movies because he has so much experience. And so seeing that sort of turned me around to be like, okay, I should probably...
No, sorry, I'm responding.
I should probably shut up and listen to him because he knows a lot.
The media shapes perception more than truth, but Ground News offers a fix. This website and app gathers over 50,000 global articles daily. They organize them by story and show clear visuals on political bias. Interviewer said something, I couldn't really understand what he said, but it seemed to throw Nick Reiner through a loop. Watch this right here.
Think in the form that he could express himself the best, which is making movies because he has so much experience. And so seeing that sort of turned me around to be like, okay, I should probably...
No, sorry, I'm responding.
I should probably shut up and listen.
Rude of the interviewer there.
To him.
He seems confused in social situations. He doesn't know how to react. We're not seeing much of any emotion at all in his face. Typically when people speak or they want to be heard, they lift their eyebrows up to get people excited about what they're saying. We're seeing little to no emotion coming from him.
No, sorry, I'm responding.
I should probably shut up and listen to him because he knows a lot more about this. He knows I don't know anything, so I'll learn whatever he has to teach me.
I just think that's such a fascinating thing to say, that like your father, who you would always want to be at his best as your father, may be a type of person who's at his best when he's making movies, and that makes him more understandable or relatable as a father to you, which is so fascinating to me.
Yeah, that it really clicked for me because we didn't bond a lot as a kid. Like, he really liked baseball. I like basketball, and he could watch that with my brother, but baseball. But I just, when I saw him do that, and it was something that I'm interested in, I was like, wow, like he really knows a lot. And like,
now we're actually seeing some eyebrow raises as he's talking about not being bonded to his father and that his brother liked baseball and all of these things. Now we're seeing some real feeling. The feeling of not being bonded to him when he was a child seems to be something that he really feels.
I like basketball, and he could watch that with my brother, but baseball. But I just, when I saw him do that, and it was something that I'm interested in, I was like, wow, like he really knows a lot. And like, it made me feel closer to him and be like, yeah.
You're like, wow, my dad.
And so, again, on the Dopey podcast, he talks about this. He's talking about this tour for the movie Being Charlie. And what did he say on the Dopey podcast? He said he was basically just playing along and faking it, having external compliance so that when he left, then he would go smoke a joint or do whatever he wanted to do. And this felt like for him that he wasn't truly being authentic. He didn't think the movie represented him as well as it could. So this is his just attempt at a persona here, attempt at just going along with things.
It's Rob Reiner.
I never had thought about it.
See, he doesn't reflect other people's emotions. He doesn't smile along with them. Typically, we do that automatically. Somebody's laughing or smiling, particularly in an interview setting. It's hard not to do that at least a little bit. You get nothing. He doesn't try to mimic what other people are doing. He doesn't connect in that way. His social skills are peculiar.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, my dad's Rob Reiner.
I never had thought about it. And then
Yeah. It didn't cross your mind, right?
Never.
No.
Never watched A Few Good Men. Didn't see that one.
No.
And here's another sidebar thought. And I'm not sure if this has to do more with being on the spectrum and myself, but there are some people where if they like really try to connect with me and I'm not feeling it, it's just the last thing I want to do. And I want to run the other way. And it has to kind of be like, I have to feel it's not forced and it's more of a safe space. But if someone's like continually trying to connect and I'm just not feeling it, nothing will make me shut down faster than that, especially before. But I can still be that way to an extent. And I wonder if a little bit of that's going on here.
But it's interesting that Nick would talk about it in that way because, yeah, we did share that experience. But, you know, even though I've had a lot of experience making movies, you know, and I said this to him many, many times, that he was the heart and soul of the film. So,
and he really believes that. I know I keep talking about the eyebrows, but they could be very interesting highlighting certain words. Watch this.
you know, and I said this to him many, many times, that he was the heart and soul of the film. So
He's the heart and soul of the film. So that's something that Rob Reiner truly feels about this film that was made.
it has.
Did you work with him on set? Were you on set for the majority of the shooting?
Mm-hmm. I was on set with him. Yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I have no idea what I was going to say.
And
No, he was there every day.
See, even when he's being self-deprecating, watch this right here.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I have no idea what I was going to say.
This is someone who seems to really struggle to connect socially. And this can create a lot of problems when it comes to their perception of the world. So I talked about him not particularly mimicking smiling and laughing. Right now, you're getting a very slight, awkward smile. But if you cover up the bottom half of his face and just look at his eyes are so intense. There appears to be confusion. There's some anger. There's some frustration there. There's so much behind the eyes when you look at him right here.
Kind of. I mean, of all the pictures we've seen, he looks less confused and angry here than he does in the more recent pictures. And I think with some of this, it's just like Nick needed to find himself, and he needed to find like a goal for himself that didn't involve just being the druggy bad boy. And granted, I totally acknowledge how difficult it is to do that when your mental health isn't good. When your mental health isn't good, it just gets in the way of everything. And this is something that, unless you've experienced it yourself, it's going to be really difficult to understand, but it does encompass everything. And then if you think addiction and drugs are your only way to feel okay at all, and you feel so awful normally that, of course, you want to go run do drugs, well, that's why that baseline becomes important. But those are the kinds of things I would have said to someone like Nick. But it's also true, if someone has the wrong attitude, there's nothing that you can say to someone with the wrong attitude that's going to help them, because it's going to fall on deaf ears. And of course, though, unfortunately, when you're struggling with mental health, depression, anxiety, you're way more likely to have a bad attitude, where some of this, I do think mindset stuff does need to get bombarded into people. And sure, that can sound pretty obnoxious to some people, right? They'll say, oh, are you trying to be toxically positive? Are you trying to spiritually bypass? But I'll tell you what, as someone who's been there in his shoes and have gotten to where I am today, mindset's a big part of it. And I'm not saying to gaslight people with toxic positivity, but there certainly is an element of, you got to get the right attitude. And I totally get how difficult it is, but that's also why it's important.
Despite the fact that there's a very slight smile on his face.
He's a great actor, and Nick was there for all the casting, you know, all of the auditions.
I was sitting there, but
yeah, but you always gave your opinion.
I was like, I saw that girl Morgan Saylor on Homeland, and I think during the season she like went to rehab or something, and I was just like, oh, she's a perfect rehab girl.
Yeah,
that was the only.
He pushed for Morgan Saylor like crazy.
See, even when he tells jokes, he doesn't really smile. Occasionally he does, but for the most part, he's not connected with the feeling of what's being talked about.
And I think during the season she like went to rehab or something, and I was just like, oh, she's a perfect rehab girl.
Yeah,
that was the only.
He pushed for Morgan Saylor like crazy. Yeah.
You had a person.
And some of this reminds me of him, like some of these interviews, it kind of gives me like an Asperger's vibe in a way, where maybe some of it you could say maybe a schizophrenia vibe. I'm not sure. But I get a little more of like the Asperger type vibe is what I get.
Personal connection to her right away?
No, but
just felt like you knew her.
Felt like I knew her from some land.
Yeah.
No.
So when he was asked if he had a personal connection to her, he immediately replies, no. This is someone who may really struggle to feel a personal connection to much of anybody. At least based on this interview, it seems like that's very possible.
Just felt like you knew her.
And then you see him look away. So what we're seeing is someone who doesn't just seem socially anxious. People that are socially anxious can be a little bit awkward, might stumble a little bit, but typically there's a rhythm you can get into to where they start to feel a little bit more comfortable and they go, hey, you know what? That wasn't so bad. He is firmly planting himself as staying awkward in this. He will not play the game. And he really seems to struggle with connecting with others, whether it's the interviewer or even this actress, it sounds like.
No, but
And also to note, in a public setting like this, people might be overanalyzing some of this. If someone's not used to speaking in public, it can be a really anxiety-provoking experience. And especially if you have mental health stuff going on too, or maybe you're undiagnosed on the spectrum, then it just makes it that much worse. And so any of those things that you have going on in you just look even worse in front of other people. So keep that in mind as well.
Felt like you knew her.
Felt like I knew her from some land.
Yeah.
No.
And this kid is, I mean, he carries the movie in many ways. He's in.
And you can see he puts his microphone facing down after that. He really wants to stop talking.
And about the Asperger's is now just considered part of autism. You're not even supposed to say Asperger's anymore. You're supposed to just say autistic spectrum, ASD. But I think Asperger's can apply. Like, I think it was a helpful thing. Now, maybe you would say Asperger's is just more level 1. Okay, if you want to say that, you can. But just so you know, Asperger's is now just under the autism umbrella. You're not supposed to say it.
And
yeah. No. And this kid is, I mean, he carries the movie in many ways. He's in every scene of the film. And
another thing, other than casting, we all stayed at a hotel, the Hyatt House, at this, and we all hung out after every day. And that kid, when he first showed up, he had like a book about junkies. He had like watched some YouTube, and he started asking me questions about it. And I would try to fill him in as best as possible. But since the writing was done by us and Matt, he kind of got our sensibilities. So did Devin, from just hanging out with us, try to help.
So interestingly, he seems much more passionate when talking about his history with substances, when he's talking about bonding with people, his relationship with his father, when he's trying to connect with the interviewer. None of that's going well. But when he's talking about his own experiences, he actually does seem to pretty fluidly be able to talk about these things.
Did you find that? Did you find at a time when Nick needed you that you were also maybe really busy with a movie that you were working on? Because making movies, making TV shows does take a lot of work, be it on the set, reading the scripts, or just dealing with the business behind the scenes.
That's a better question to ask Nick, because I don't know if I was as available as I might have been, but that's something that you could answer. I mean,
what was the question? Sorry.
He wanted to know if being involved.
So I'm curious if Nick wasn't really listening or what he was focused on outside of listening to the interview. Now, it's not like we can't lose focus when people are speaking to us, but it seemed like he completely wasn't paying attention when someone was speaking to his father. His
kind of like dissociated almost a little bit, just kind of zoned out.
Brain was elsewhere. He may be somebody that's fairly impulsive. He may struggle to pay attention to things. He may struggle to have focus. But let's keep going. This gets pretty interesting.
In show business and all that took me away from you to any degree that
No.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Now, his response to this was very, very telling. I believe there is more to how he feels about this. I'm going to show you why. Let's go back.
To any degree that
No.
Well, that's good.
So immediately he just says no, looks away, puts his microphone down. He's basically saying, I have nothing else to say about this. He didn't say, no, you were great. I loved growing up with you. You were around plenty, whatever it is. He didn't add any detail to that. He just said no, put his microphone down, and now he's sitting very still. He wants this question to pass on by. He really doesn't want to engage more in this. I think there are a lot more feelings here.
Took me away from you to any degree that
No.
No.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Nick, what about you? How often do you find yourself having the same sort of comic tenor as your father?
Well, I try to be funny whenever I can, but I don't really know. I don't know what that meant.
Well, when you're working on this script, did you feel like you had
This goes back to the idea that he doesn't have much social etiquette. He doesn't seem to understand social situations very well.
Be funny whenever I can, but I don't really know. I don't know what that meant.
Well, when you're working on this script, did you feel like you had to sort of inject humor, or did you sort of find the humor organically?
No, there's so much funny stuff that happens in rehab, and a lot of funny people. Like, it's tragic and all, but the people that are there are not going to want you to throw them a pity party. They're going to want you to laugh at the situation and make light of it.
There's a great scene in it, in the movie when you see it, where the main character Charlie is gotten bathroom detail, and he's having to clean the bathroom, and he's with his.
So one thing I want you to also focus on is that his father is not domineering in the sense that he's taking over the conversation or interrupting him. I think he's doing his best to let Nick Reiner talk, to get him to say something, but he keeps this going. He keeps it more fluid. He keeps it more comfortable for everybody. And so the awkwardness of Nick Reiner is minimized by Rob Reiner injecting himself in certain situations. So I don't see him as somebody who's ignoring Nick Reiner or is speaking over him or anything like that. But obviously he has much bigger body language. He moves a lot more. He certainly seems a lot more comfortable, obviously.
His friend there, and they're working, the two guys in rehab, they're cleaning the bathroom. And there's a dialogue between the two of them that's hysterical. And it's actually a conversation that Nick had with somebody that he encountered, and so they put it right in the script.
Yeah, the confusion in that scene is very real, and I sort of got a sense when I watched it, like, this is a real conversation.
Yeah.
I can tell that this conversation
This actually happened
somewhere.
and he couldn't figure out what that. I mean, for those of you who haven't seen it,
Now here's a very uncomfortable moment. I want you to watch Nick Reiner's mouth right here.
this actually happened to Nick,
somewhere.
and he couldn't figure out what that. I mean,
So we're getting a sneer. This is anger. He does not like talking about this. Not only is he uncomfortable, but something about this is making him feel angry, actually. And this is them talking about what should be a funny moment. They're talking about the humor in the film. They're talking about a real experience that he had. But this is bringing up some serious anger for him.
Conversation.
Yeah.
I can tell that this conversation
this actually happened to Nick,
somewhere.
and he couldn't figure out what that. I mean, for those of you who haven't seen it, I don't want to give too much of away, but it's about a guy who gets sexual favors and also scores dope. And
it's a who's on first with heroin and hookers.
And the other guy can't figure out, well, what is the guy who's giving you the favors? He's also giving you the dope. What is he getting out of this? And he couldn't figure it out. So it's pretty funny.
Rob, I have to ask, as we said that you're.
It's one of the rare moments we actually are seeing a little bit of discomfort from Rob Reiner. The way that he grips himself afterward, it's almost like holding on to himself because what he just talked about made him feel uncomfortable.
And he couldn't figure it out. So it's pretty funny.
Rob, I have to ask,
And you saw his hand go up right there. It's almost like expelling a little bit of extra energy because he's feeling a little bit uncomfortable right now too.
Out of this, and he couldn't figure it out. So it's pretty funny.
All right, let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Hopefully this is helping you better understand some of the behavior and body language that we saw today. At its core, this interview is deeply uncomfortable. Nick Reiner appears deeply uncomfortable. The interviewer and Rob Reiner, they seem fine. I could see somebody watching this and not really noticing the degree of awkwardness and the degree of discomfort. But based on what we're seeing, it seems that Nick Reiner likely felt very uncomfortable at times. He had a lot of intense feelings that he would cover up. There were things that he both wanted to say, things he didn't want to say. It seems like, given the dynamic between them, that Nick Reiner may have felt misunderstood by his father. Maybe he felt like he couldn't express himself, or maybe he felt like he was unseen. There is an odd dynamic between them. Rob Reiner appears like he's trying to connect with him. Maybe he feels like he's understanding him better. Based on him saying he understands him better now, implies that he maybe felt like he didn't understand him before. Nick Reiner saying that he didn't feel bonded when they were children means that there are obviously a lot of intense feelings here, that there is clearly a bunch of unresolved feelings here if he's in fact guilty of what he's been accused of. I do want to be clear, he's only a suspect at this point. He's been arrested, but as far as I know, he's not confessed to the crime. He obviously hasn't been to trial yet. So what we've observed in this video is not going to speak to his innocence nor his guilt, but we're making observations based on the dynamics between Rob Reiner and his son. If you have any other thoughts about this, or if there's anything else you want.
So this guy I don't know. I feel like he kind of overcomplicated it a little bit. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what else he has to say about other things, depending on the time. And then Bad Things, True Crime.
Rob and Nick. Other guests have denied an argument ever took place, but Nick's behavior was described as erratic, reportedly asking strangers if they were famous and making others uncomfortable. After the scene, the Reiners left the party early and returned to their Brentwood home. Sometime after midnight, in the early hours of Sunday, December 14th, Rob and Michelle were killed. Authorities allege the attack happened in their bedroom. Both died from multiple stab wounds.
Thank you very much for this to Thrive. Yeah, we got 1.1 thousand viewers. It's pretty good. I mean, we're coming far away here from not as many viewers to rocking and rolling here. So I appreciate all the support from the fellow black sheep here. Wouldn't be this many without you all, of course. So I appreciate it. And I'm grateful too, considering all the subject matter that I'm talking about and having all the struggles I've had. It means a lot to me to be where I am now with this, considering where I came from.
The exact time of death has not been publicly confirmed, but officials believe it occurred while the couple was preparing for or already in bed. Around 4 a.m., Nick checked into the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica under his real name. Hotel staff later described the room as containing blood in the shower and on the mattress, though police have not confirmed these details publicly. Surveillance footage reportedly showed Nick arriving alone. At 3:30 p.m. that afternoon, the Reiner's daughter Romy arrived at the house after their massage therapist failed to reach them. She discovered her father's body and called 911. Responders found both Rob and Michelle deceased. That evening, with Nick missing and presumed last seen at the home, LAPD named him the primary suspect. At approximately 9:15 p.m., Nick was arrested near USC after being spotted on surveillance footage at a South LA gas station. Police said he surrendered without incident and appeared calm. Nick was booked on suspicion of murder in the early morning of December 15th. Detectives searched both the Brentwood home and his hotel room, seizing potential evidence. By midday, news of the Reiner's death spread across national media, though police withheld official details until charges were announced. On December 16th, the LA County District Attorney's Office charged Nick with 2 counts of first-degree murder, citing special circumstances for multiple victims and use of a deadly weapon. A court appearance was postponed after his attorney said Nick had not been medically cleared to attend. 2 days later, Nick appeared in court wearing a prevention smock. His lawyer, Alan Jackson, cited very complex and serious issues, widely interpreted as a reference to Nick's mental state. Meanwhile, his siblings Jake and Romy Reiner issued a statement calling the loss unimaginable and asking for compassion and privacy. Autopsies confirmed that Rob and Michelle died of multiple sharp force injuries. Their bodies were released to family on December 19th, with friends including Billy Crystal, Larry David, and Meg Ryan paying tribute publicly and privately. By December 21st, reports confirmed that Nick had been prescribed medication for schizophrenia prior to the murders. Whether he was taking it at the time remains unknown. Investigators have said no other suspects are being pursued. Prosecutors have not identified a specific motive, though they've stated the case remains active. Nick is currently in custody, awaiting trial. As investigators built their case against Nick Reiner, the central question shifted from who to why. While the evidence pointed squarely to Nick as the only suspect, The motive remained unclear. Multiple theories emerged, from official narratives to speculative explanations, each offering a different lens on what may have triggered the fatal events of December 14th. Number 1. The official narrative. A son acts alone. Prosecutors allege that Nick Reiner killed his parents in an act of intentional family violence. There were no signs of forced entry or outside involvement, and Nick was the only unaccounted-for person in the house that night. Authorities say the evidence, including reported blood in his hotel room and his disappearance, supports a solo act. As District Attorney Nathan Hochman stated, "This was a shocking and tragic case. We intend to pursue justice." The legal theory doesn't rely on motive, only the act itself.
I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm learning anything new from this video. And I think it might be an AI video as well, which gives it another strike. So I think we have better things that we can be listening to than this.
He's been cited by IGN.
Of behavior and activity from the Conan O'Brien. The hopes of Hollywood for a plea of insanity from Rob Reiner's son, Nick, likely just went down the drain. And now the celebrities all have to fear going to trial, subpoenas, affidavits, testimony, and more. Today we'll tell you why going crazy likely went out the door. Hello, folks, and Merry Christmas. It is a beautiful day, and thank goodness that we get to be here for this wonderful day. We've got some news here that, well, it's not pleasant, but it must be covered, and we're here to do just that, even on a day such as this. So click the like button, drop a comment down below, let us know your thoughts, and we'll explain why it is now exceedingly unlikely that Nick Reiner will be able to convince anyone that he was just crazy, and that's why he did what he did, allegedly, to his very famous parents. Well, it's looking a little tough to do that insanity plea now, and we've got the details to tell you. Somehow, Nick Reiner got in a little bit more trouble than he already was, and he's in plenty enough. Jared Downing has this one out of the U.S. News.
Let's just have a moment of silence to appreciate the fact I don't do the obnoxious music in the background on my channel. Amen.
Nick Reiner hunkered down in trendy hotel with sweeping, priceless seaside views, allegedly after deleting his parents, Rob and Michelle. And remember, this would also be hours after the Christmas party at Conan O'Brien's place. This story is going to be rough. Nepo baby junkie. Boy, the New York Post they're not holding back anymore. Nepo baby junkie Nick Reiner checked into a trendy beach hotel with an indoor fire pit and sweeping views of bougie Santa Monica, allegedly after doing what he did to his parents. And it's bad. It's real bad. In fact, the details are coming out now. We may not even talk about the details here because it's just so unpleasant. The privileged accused deletion son of the legendary Hollywood director was in enough of a frame of mind, and this is what we get into. This is what matters to us.
Now, I do hate AI videos as a rule, but I have a guilty pleasure. There is one AI song I really like, The Gangster Paradise by Sold Out. It sounds like real and human. And I listen to it at the gym. It's only on Spotify now. But that song is pretty damn good. And it's actually concerning that AI is even able to make something that good, because to me, it's the beginning of the end. I mean, it will really be the end the second they make AI that you can sleep with. Oh, then it's all over. Then we're done. I mean, but the first thing to go is going to be people's jobs. That's first.
Because it has effect on the trial. We know celebrities may have to testify in the trial, and it could be very ugly for Hollywood. But he was in enough of a frame of mind, according to New York Post, to find his way to the Pierside Hotel, just steps from the tiny California town's iconic pier in the pre-dawn hours of December 14th. Now, to give you a timeline, folks, what this means is that earlier in the evening, this guy was at the Conan O'Brien Christmas party with a whole bunch of A-listers, tons of A-listers. The celebrities allegedly debated whether or not this guy should get a call to the officials to put him into a mental hold. And because that didn't happen, some people are blaming Conan, some people are blaming others, whatever. This guy went and deleted his parents in a horrific way, the details of which we won't read here because it's just so awful now that they've leaked out. It's really terrible. Allegedly. Then he goes, apparently, to a swaggy hotel. And I'm sorry, the question has to be.
It's not such a swaggy hotel.
Okay, but it
just isn't.
Okay, well, Lou, you're aware of the hotel, but let me ask you this.
I just looked it up out of curiosity. It's an old Holiday Inn that got converted into something a little more pop culture, but $235 a night on December 25th in Santa Monica is not a swaggy hotel.
Okay, so here's the question, though, because what it's talking about is that it has this sweeping view of the
freeway.
Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Did he perhaps purchase this so that he could have one last place to look across and enjoy? Here's an interior shot of the hotel. It's not bad.
Yeah.
The pier side, it's not terrible.
Thank you, Toothrive. That Mark Lieta video is an interesting look into the reality of addiction and Nick's homeless experience. Keep killing it with the stream, Jared. Thank you, Toothrive. And I did see that. It'll just have to be like more, probably a separate stream at some point. Or we'll see. We'll see if people want to watch it at a point. It probably won't be today, but perhaps another day. If people want to watch the guy from Soft White Underbelly go down, I guess it's Skid Row is where they go down.
Yeah, but not for Santa Monica.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Converted motel. Okay.
Fair enough. But did he want to have one last place that he could look out? And then what does that mean? Well, that means that if you're smart enough, and I'm not suggesting that he stole mommy and daddy's, credit card or financial stuff, but I'm not going to, dissuade you from believing that. But if he's smart enough to go and get a hotel after this, he's smart enough to stand trial. And I think this takes the insanity thing, perhaps, off the table.
It shows a certain level of premeditation, but whether that negates any insanity stuff is another story.
Right. So without going into the grisly details, and I wish that these places would not give the grisly details, I'll just say that according to E! News, that Rob and Michelle Reiner allegedly passed away within minutes of sustaining multiple sharp force injuries, and those were aimed at the upper part of their body. We'll just do that. And their bodies have already been cremated, and so that's that. I kind of find it odd that that's already happened. A lot of times with law enforcement investigations, they don't permit it to go that quickly. Again, we're not going to go there, though, okay? What this means, though, is we had discussed before, and I guess we'll go to you, Culture, next on this one. Culture, we had discussed before the idea that maybe the California political elite, because the Reiners were so well connected, maybe they would say, let's get this swept under the rug. This involves the Christmas party. Just put this guy away on insanity. Never let him see the light of day again. Get an agreement, get it done, and get him out of here. That's a much harder thing to have happen now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I would suspect based on.
So this is a good question, Sally. Where'd it go? Well, Sally asked if there was any security footage or anything. And my guess would be there probably is, but we have not had that confirmed yet. I mean, you better believe the Reiners had security footage and home security systems more than likely. Now, did Nick have the wherewithal to turn them all off? That would be another sign of intent, though, right? That would be another sign of knowing exactly what he was doing. So they're those things, if I had to guess, they're out there.
newly released details that, as LW Ghost mentioned, if they determine any level of predetermination or any planning that was behind this, I don't think that they're going to be able to claim insanity. In fact, I think if he was competent enough to remedy the situation he was in after stabbing his parents, and put himself in a different place, in a different position, I think that also indicates that he had a level of possession of his faculties that
well, he had to go to the hotel. He had to present himself in a way that
they would rent it to him.
Right.
So yeah,
and he has to take all those steps. Ron, it gets even worse if the hotel was pre-purchased, and we don't know that information yet.
Yeah,
but if he had ordered the hotel room, before or during the criminal.
I just looked, and you can buy a room there tonight without a reservation. So,
well, let me tell you, Lou. I bet you can now. I bet you can for a little bit, except for the very morbid who might try to get that hotel room, and we don't recommend that they do. Ron, what do you think about the idea of this guy he deletes his parents that love him, and he just casually strolls on over to a hotel to go get a view of the town?
I'm not saying that insanity is the right word for it, but is gosh, I can't
technical
put
term
myself,
is diminished capacity.
I guess, but I can't put myself in a mental place where I struggle to see how anybody gets to that place where they can purposefully delete another human life. I have a very, very difficult time. When I was 18 or so, and I was kind of raised in a little bit more of a liberal household, and certainly in St. Louis, which is a liberal town. When I first went into college, I definitely was not in a position where I even thought about going into the military. But part of the reason for that wasn't that I wasn't willing to stand up for my country. It's that I knew that the eventual outcome could be having to delete lives.
So here's the cocktail to create homicide: an impaired empathy to no empathy, an extreme self-centeredness, probably some envy, bitterness, resentfulness, anger, rage, or possibly even Machiavellianism, depending. So, for example, if you're a mob boss or you're in the show The Wire, you order people to be killed. And that's more of like cold and calculating, though, like a psychopath. Why do they do it? Because they're Machiavellian. They're all about power, control, and they want what they want. And they want to get more status, money, power, and they want to climb the ladder. So to me, those are the ingredients of homicide. And people that have empathy, it's probably going to be difficult for them to understand it. But if you don't, and there's other building blocks of it as well. It's not the only building block required. There's others more than likely required too. And usually people that have a lack of empathy, they also have one of the other things I mentioned as well.
It's not something I ever wanted to do, and I can't put myself in the place of anybody that would ever. I understand anger. I understand madness and all of those things, but I think I was studying something somewhere about the like our emotional states. If whatever our emotional state is, if we can just get ourselves calm, it can go away completely in 90 seconds. We can change literally in 90 seconds. So to work yourself up, like I think that he had to be worked up for ages to do what he did.
Oh, sure. He probably considered this.
Yeah.
I don't know, but.
And also, what can also do it? What can also like give you the courage to take life? Drugs and alcohol, plus maybe mental health issues as well. All of that also contributes to possibly being a reason.
Maybe 1,000 times in his head. What they've got to figure out, they've got to assess now, Vash, is they've got to assess premeditation or not. And we can see here this picture of him at a gas station before whatever occurred, and we know what occurred. The other thing too is we got to start asking, and maybe this is where the investigation is going to go. They talked about his extraordinarily strange behavior at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party, where he was asking people allegedly if they were famous or not and wanting to know about them. Was he planning to do more? Like, that's what we got to start wondering. Like, what was he up to exactly at that Christmas party before he was removed? Because hours later he did this, and that activity is encapsulated in a lot of other things where he's maintaining a demeanor that's not the same as at the Christmas party, and obviously when he does the deletion. So this guy may have been cold and calculated, and that's part of what is going to be in the trial, I would say.
So was Lex Luthor, but he was crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, this is all really.
Thank you very much to Thrive for this. A alcoholic dad deleted his fam and himself over NFL. I did see that, and that guy that's absurd, right? I'll have to look into that case. We can go over that case if you all are interested as well. That's certainly a case going on right now. It's ridiculous, right? Just ridiculous.
Outside of our job description, I think.
To some degree, it is, Lou, and we're not a legal channel. Exactly. The question though is, now that it's going to involve, you can be guaranteed you're going to have a lot of celebrities being pulled in to testify and give their thoughts on this and you're going to have subpoenas and affidavits and all that kind of thing. And this could get very ugly for Hollywood, and it doesn't seem like they can sweep it under the rug. That seems to be gone away by this latest set of leaks.
I don't think they could before. I mean, there's, I guess, an exchange with Bill Hader at some point at that party where he's like, hey, this is our conversation kind of thing. And that sends him over the edge or potentially or whatever. We still don't know what might be, if there's any additional substances at play.
Look, we've seen, for example, in the death of oh God, my mind is going blank. The guy from Cheers, or from Friends, where the doctors who supplied him with the drugs are getting legal problems.
Matthew Perry.
Yeah, Matthew Perry. So to the degree that there's some culpability in the medications he was being given, that's a side issue. But still,
right?
I don't know. I
know it's a very difficult,
As far as culpability for the psychiatrists go, you'd have to prove knowledgeable, direct negligence for there to be any culpability for them. It's very difficult to hold them culpable.
And it's not the kind of thing we want to talk about or like to talk about. But again, we're curious about what exactly happened at the party. Who's going to have to testify? Does this get uglier in a way that we hope it doesn't? Because ultimately, what do we hope? I mean, listen, there'd be a lot of YouTube channels out there. There were a lot of YouTube channels that were sort of made off the backs of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and what went on there. If this thing blows up where there was stuff going on at the party that we don't know about yet, you're going to have a lot of YouTube channels. But that's not really what we want to do. But we also don't want to be ignorant of it. And so we just want to cover it in the right way and talk about, in this next step of it, the insanity plea probably now off the table. Lauren, give us your final thought. Yeah, go ahead, Vash.
I agree. I don't think it's going to work, but I don't think it's off the table for them. I still think they're going to try. I still think they're going to try to pull up some evidence. And again, Alan Jackson, he's going to give him a hell of a defense. The best defense money can buy.
Well, I'd be very surprised if this trial was televised, but Lord, final thoughts.
Well, Vash, why would you be surprised if it's not televised, or if it is televised?
Because I think it's going to be the judge might consider it to be a media circus and might not allow that.
Depends on the judge. What if he's Lancido and he wants one?
It's possible. It is very possible, but in the modern era,
there have
been a lot of
Right.
There have been a lot of justices who have just said, you know what, we're just not going to do this, and they've enforced stricter guidelines when it comes to even the broadcasting of a trial at all. So I don't know, but
maybe the judge says, I'm going to be the next Judge Judy, baby. Here we go. Who knows, right? Lauren, I'll give you the final thoughts on this one. I think Lou is right, and I hear the pushback, and I accept it. this is sort of outside of what we typically do. What we're worried about, though, and what we're thinking about is this now removes that variable we had been discussing previously, where we thought maybe it's going to be swept away. Not going to be the case now, probably. And if that's what's going to happen, the celebrity is going to get pulled into this. I don't see any other way, because it seems to me there's a continuity of behavior and activity from the Conan O'Brien Christmas party, maybe something that precedes it that we don't know about, then to the parents, then to the hotel, and all of it seems to be part of some calculus this guy has about, creating conflict, and then what do you do after the conflict before the police arrive?
I'm going to Disneyland.
Well, the Pierside Hotel, maybe.
I'm not going to speculate on his frame of mind, because I know that he was agitated during the party. We can argue about whether or not he was attempting to spark something prior to that. We don't know what substances he was on. We know that he was a troubled individual. The one thing that I would caution against is this idea that you can't put yourself into the frame of mind of somebody who would do this thing. It's an awful thing. It is. But I would say evil exists.
Yeah.
And there are people that can put themselves into that frame of mind. And
I do think evil exists. My definition of evil is committing harm very intentionally, especially if you enjoy it. So it's a little bit like sadism too, but I think that can be evil.
And if you can't, that's great. But I think that we have a tendency to look too easily to what could have excused the behavior. What was the past? What was the beef? What was he on? I don't care. The man killed his parents.
Right. So what we heard about Conan at the party was that he didn't want to call the cops. We don't know what the exact quote was, but that's what we know. We know that he didn't want to call the cops. Conan hasn't spoken since, and he's probably not going to say a word unless he has to.
Now, whether that means that he has to face justice at the hands of the law, as far as I know, I don't believe California has the death penalty, so I don't think he'd be at risk of that.
Well, I think it does. I think that California does, right? It just never uses it at all. Is that right, guys?
Okay.
Yes.
The other possibility is that he is committed for a very long time. I hope. I don't know where he ends up, and I think that it's probably a little irresponsible to speculate on that too much. The only thing that I would say is, just because it's difficult for us to picture it, I don't like getting into speculating about what could have sparked it, because it doesn't matter. Nothing justifies what happened, and that's the thing that I think we have to keep most clearly in mind.
Well, regarding California and the death penalty, they have had it since 1978. They've had 13 executions, and the last was in 2006.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're not in any hurry.
Right. I always like to give people something to take away, because it's very easy to do these kinds of topics. It's very easy to do these kind of videos and just leave it at that. And that's what most places do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I try to elevate, and I try to bring something down that we can actually digest ourselves. And so what I would say is that Lorna is exactly right. It would be easy to say this is something that bad people do and just shove it into a corner and never look at it. What I would think is a better thing for us to do as people is to look at this and say, you know what? When I have a bad thought or a negative desire, I'm not going to habituate that. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm not going to replay that in my mind over and over, because that is, I believe, the precedent to tragic consequences down the road, is when we habituate having dreams or visions or desires or wants, and we focus on those and we start to play with them. And then we also start to explain them away, why they're not so terrible. Folks, that's the road you don't want to go down. Don't ever do that. It is not wise. And that's how I believe you cross that bridge into a place you don't want to be.
And the only benefit of exploring this to any of us and any of our audience is, I'm happy to say I haven't got any family or friends like this as far as I know. But if you do, who are either suffering from mental problems or taking certain drugs or whatever, then you want to know enough about it to be able to protect yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And,
that's a great
point. That's the only value in this, is to say, well, could it happen to me or somebody I care about or my friend with the crazy brother or whoever? And if so, what can I do to protect first myself and my family, and secondly, society at large by calling attention to these things? In other words,
all right, AI music comes on. It's time to get out. This video here is about the crime scene, which I'm interested in because I think it'll be telling.
This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Bruschi, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
By the time Romy Reiner walked into her parents' Brentwood home on that Sunday afternoon and found them dead in the master bedroom, her brother Nick had been gone for hours. The murders allegedly happened early that morning. Nick reportedly checked into a hotel in Santa Monica, then somehow ended up walking the streets near USC, where he was arrested without incident around 9:15 p.m., caught on camera at a gas station buying a bottled drink like it was any other night. The murder weapon has not yet been recovered, but according to law enforcement, they have enough. So how did investigators piece this together so fast? And what does the evidence really tell us? Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent, with us to help us break this down and get a better understanding of the investigative end of this in our first part of the conversation here. Jen, Romy discovered her parents' bodies in the master bedroom around 3:30 on Sunday afternoon, allegedly, but the murders allegedly occurred far earlier that morning. When investigators arrived to a scene where the victims have been dead for almost half a day here, probably roughly 12 hours, give or take a little bit. What is the immediate priority at that moment in time for a scene like this?
Well, the immediate priority is safety. They're going to want to make sure that whoever did that isn't anywhere in and around that area. So they're going to be able to go in and do sort of a scene safety type clear. But remember, the biggest clue that they had when they hit the scene was Romy saying purportedly that Nick had done this. And so that.
And also to note, the rest of the Reiner family, even though it's a tragedy for them, there's a possibility there's some virtue signaling in here. So they want to seem like, oh, we're not blaming our brother. We're having his back because family or whatever. We're going to blame the doctors. There could be an element of that. Because like a commenter said, I mean, she found them. At least she found the mother. That's got to scar you for life. I mean, PTSD for life.
Is the first clue and kind of pointer as to what direction this investigation might be going.
And one person just saying that obviously it's powerful. It's the sister that is just as close to this family as everyone is in that circle between her brothers and herself. So obviously she would be somebody to listen to, but there's obviously going to be more behind that statement. I would imagine that they went into questioning very early on in terms of what they knew and why she was saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. They would have had a very intense interview with her, and not just with her, with neighbors, with others. What did people see? They would have done a full-on canvas of that neighborhood. And in addition to that, they also got a search warrant very early on, even though it took a while to get a judge to sign it and to get in. And once they got in, they could find a lot of things. For instance, they specifically said there was no forced entry anywhere. So that always indicates that an individual who had direct access to that house was involved in the crime. They also would have seen just the area. In other words, was anything taken? Was anything disturbed? Or was really just the scene slaughtered?
Yeah. Do you think they would have interviewed people from the party at that point? I mean, do you think that those people were important to this as well?
They were. As soon as Romy would have had to give some of that. In other words, they were at a party. So now the party comes on the radar, and now you're dispatching detectives to go to speak with Conan O'Brien and other people that were at that party. So certainly that elevates the interviews that need to be done and need to be done quickly.
Well, and I don't know if it's absolute gossip or what, but I read over the weekend that one of the last things that Rob Reiner had said to somebody was, "I'm afraid for my life. I'm afraid my son is going to do something to me." Again, I don't know that that's actual fact, but
And that is what we heard. We heard that's what he said. And if you have that gut feeling about your kids, unfortunately, that's a sign to take action. No one wants to be in a position where they have to think that about one of their kids, but sometimes that's life, unfortunately. And then you got to deal with it. And then you got to do the next right thing from there. You can't do nothing because now his inaction might have contributed to his wife not being around now either. But of course, ultimately, the blame is on Nick here. That can't be understated at all. And also, I think what we're going to see about this crime scene part, the prosecution is withholding all of the really important stuff. So this is mostly just speculation because until the prosecution presents their case, then you're going to see much more of the details. You're going to learn about the weapon. You're going to learn about what they learned from Nick, what they learned from Romy, what they learned from a toxicology report. You're going to learn about all this.
Wouldn't surprise me that if that's the reason they brought him to the party, they were concerned. There was something going on. He didn't quite fit in at the party, but they brought him anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reading so many rumors and so many things being said. And of course, I always say with every rumor, there's at least a grain of truth. And that was one of the last questions I always ask when I conducted an interview is, have you heard anything? Were there any rumors? And oftentimes those don't ferret out completely to be the accurate rumor or the accurate truth, but they're pretty good pointers as well.
Reports indicate that Nick had checked into that Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica sometime after the alleged murders and ended up 15 miles away near USC by the time he was arrested. From an investigative standpoint, how do those movements factor into kind of reconstructing his actions and his state of mind? Because that's going to be a big thing here in these hours before and after the murders, especially if they're going to be looking at consciousness of guilt or anything of that nature, or that he had his mental, faculties about him to perform this in a way that he knew what he was doing.
It's going to be critical because I think it seems like one of the obvious directions the defense could be going is issues with his mental state, right? An insanity type plea or an insanity type defense. But this is the litmus test. Did he know what he did was wrong? It's as simple as that. You can be as crazy as Cooter Brown, but if you knew what you did was wrong. And so by him leaving the scene, he showered up. He was seen later, walking around, as you mentioned in your intro, as if it was just any other day. That's a problem. That's a problem for that defense.
Is it a problem for the defense showing that he knew it was wrong? Because I guess you could also look at it in the way of he's living a normal day after doing this. Doesn't that show in some ways that he didn't know what he did was wrong? Because he's just about going and getting a Diet Coke or whatever the hell he was buying at the gas station there. That to me sometimes would say this person truly has no clue what the hell they just did if this is how they're going to be acting, to look at it from the other angle.
That's not what it means really at all. There could be all sorts of things. So I don't agree with that.
But how many times did he ever check into a Santa Monica hotel? So they're going to be looking at routine. Is that something he normally did? Or was it truly to get rid of evidence? Also, where's the knife? Also, did he bring the knife? Or did he use one from the house? There's this great surveillance video showing him walking around in the middle of the night before the murders too. A lot of people don't realize that there's actually two sets of video. There's the soda one, and then there's the one before that. I find that a very interesting video. He's not staggering. He doesn't look at all under the influence, at least from what we can glean. And hours later, he murdered his parents.
Interesting. So there's video of him walking around pre-murder and post-murder. Very interesting. And they look apparently the same.
You need the murder weapon? Is that necessary in a case like this?
You don't need the murder weapon, but it's always nice to have. Obviously, his DNA could be on there. He could have fingerprints on there. They want to be able to match that weapon to the wounds. They want it, but you can do cases without them.
What I think a lot of people are looking at now that we've learned more about the schizophrenia diagnosis, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, but it kind of plays into this. If one knew, okay, your son is not in a great spot right now mentally, there's a medication change going on. You are going to this party this evening and you're concerned about your son, so you decide to bring him. I guess it's the judgment call that the Reiners made to bring him that I think a lot of people are wondering about. But I'm not saying this in a way to disparage Rob and Michelle Reiner. I'm saying this more in a way of, this kid had these two bamboozled in such a way that they thought this will be the best course of action. This will be the best thing for him, is to take him out to this event. Because I don't for a second think that Rob and Michelle would ever want to or intend to put their son or anyone else into any form of danger. But if you're believing the addict, if they have you convinced of this is the best route, that's a scary place to be in. What's your thoughts on just that whole thing, the fact that they brought him to the party?
Yeah, I think they were bamboozled. And that's why I said before, I would have loved to talk to Rob to say, like, where is your head at with this? Like, what is your goal? What are you hoping for here? Do you just want him to live in your guest house forever? Are you trying to help him get a job? Or do you think he's just so unstable that you're going to give in to everything? And again, that's probably what they're thinking. Like, oh my goodness, he's so unstable that we have to just like try to bend over backwards for him. But they don't realize that doesn't help. Firmness can help. Boundaries can help. Consequences can help. Trying to make them sink or swim can help. But some people think, no, that's too brutal. But again, I think with addiction, you need to lean more in that direction than the opposite direction. That's my opinion.
When clearly, it might have been a night of, we're going to have to stay home, guys.
Right. Look, this is a 32-year-old man. They have all of this history, knowing his issues. To me, I wonder how many other parties they brought him to over this extended, 2 decades of time plus that they have spent with having issues with their son. So how I see it was probably, this is not their first rodeo. This had probably happened before, that they had to take him someplace. And they really didn't have the, lights and sirens going off in their brain that something bad could happen. And that's why they took him. I bet it happened before, Tony.
Well, again, it's the frog in the boiling pot. They've been so used to this for 32 years with him.
And they never should have brought him to the party. I will stand on that. If you really think he's not safe to be alone, that's not the kind of person you should bring to a party. I don't know what they were thinking with that. And maybe this is where they're thinking, and Rob, maybe he is got a little bit of I know best or some entitlement or something, but it just wasn't a good decision.
Or however long it's been going on, that to them, he's just having an episode. He's having a downtime. To everybody else, it looks like, holy shit, what is going on here? And that's why people were so alarmed at the party. They've been steeped in it for years. To them, it was probably, yes, we're extreme, but we're kind of used to it.
Yeah. It was just another night, another night where, it's kind of a rough spot, but how many rough spots have they gone through with him?
Exactly.
And if it's never ended in anything like this, it's probably not on your radar that it's going to end, like this. And certainly there are reports that it got violent and horrible by Nick's own account of destroying the guest house, but not to the point of murder. And I guess that's an interesting place to be when you get so conditioned for so long of it's bad, but it's not quite that bad because everybody thinks.
And that's the thing. usually there's only ever going to be one attempted murder, and sometimes it succeeds. But like no one generally thinks often before that, oh yes, we have to be prepared for that worst case. Now, usually it like skips an escalation where like, yeah, you destroy the guest house, and then the next thing is actually, no, you take it all the way and do the next worst thing. So again, this is why it matters, because sometimes people can be violent with their parents, maybe just like with their fists or something. And maybe that happened too. As the woman yesterday said, Dr. Glasner, that might have been something that also happened. They just didn't mention it. And considering how his siblings are talking about it now, blaming the doctors, not Nick, that makes me think like if he was physically violent with his dad or even his mom, they probably wouldn't even say it. They probably wouldn't even mention it. So it very well could have happened. We don't know for sure, but it could have.
So that there's a line that won't be crossed until it actually is.
Yeah, I agree, Tony. And then also, I do think that the events of that night were the trigger. I really do. Whether we want to call it the straw that broke the camel's back or the proximal event that led to this explosion.
I don't agree with that. I don't think that event was the straw that broke the camel's back. I think he might have gotten a little bit of a narcissistic injury from the Bill Hader incident when Bill told him this is a private conversation. But I think this has been brewing for a while. I think he's been harnessing this resentment, building it, nurturing it, and then boom, explodes. That's what I think. I don't really think this was a straw that broke the camel's back incident.
But I think he was embarrassed and ashamed, and maybe he had been made to feel like that, or he felt like that. I'm not going to say anybody made him feel this way. You make yourself feel the way you feel. But that was the trigger, and I really believe it was. By the accounts we're reading, he was embarrassed and tired of the embarrassment, maybe.
It seems like he was seeking that out, though. If it wasn't, who did say, "Hey, private conversation here, guys," it would have been somebody else. It would have been anybody. He was going to intrude on whatever he needed to intrude on, so someone would snap at him, so he could go be the victim, so he could go have whatever episode he needed to have. I feel like this is something where I don't think anyone could have won on this one. He was acting, like an idiot. He was acting incompetent. He was acting like an addict. He was acting in such a way that anyone would have been put off by him, and they clearly were. So when you have something like that, is it the chicken before the egg? Is it, somebody? I don't think anybody's going out of their way to be an asshole to him. I think it was he's putting himself in a position where he's going to get that sort of reaction.
No, I agree with you, and I'm sure it had happened many other times in his life. That they had been embarrassed by him and how he behaved. But nevertheless, this was the proximal event to what happened.
Sure.
And then again, we don't know what happened later when they got home. If they said, listen, you're out of here. We're just done. You're 32, get a job, go on the streets, but we're done. We don't know what happened. So there is a big empty space that we might not ever know.
Putting up boundaries with an addict or add mental illness to addiction, they usually do go hand in hand in many ways. And you put those boundaries up to those people, you don't know what the hell you're going to get. And that's the scary part with that.
Want more on?
Well, let's see. Two Thrive says, thank you very much, Two Thrive. Nick felt betrayed and humiliated, I bet. Now, I would caution people to not think that a narcissistic person's hypersensitivity to criticism and perceived criticism is the same as like a guilt and shame. It can partially be humiliation, but I think they just get very angry when they're not getting the kind of admiration that they think they deserve. And often, if someone truly feels guilt and shame, they're not going to continue doing the same things over and over again. So if someone truly has shame, it's like, do you continue constantly going off the rails and continually messing up with drugs and alcohol? I would say no. I would say no. Like, I think a lot of people who think with narcissism, it's all just a shame disorder and their grandiosity is a defense to cover up toxic shame. And this is something, if you're familiar with the channel, I've gone over this many times with Dr. Salerno and Dr. Simon. I just don't always think that's the case. I think it can be the case sometimes with narcissists, but not always. And I think it's important to know that difference. Now, in that party, I don't think a narcissistic injury helps him, but I think before that night, there was already clearly trouble. If the reason why Rob brought him to the party is because he didn't want to leave him alone, and he had already thought reportedly that my son could hurt me and he's petrified of him. I think he said that before the Bill Hader incident. That's why I think that wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back. I think that was already brewing, in my opinion. That Bill Hader incident didn't help, but I don't think that was the primary trigger. Yeah, I mean, Dr. Salerno and I, we talk about that all the time. And ultimately, it's kind of for entertainment purposes in a way, that whole discussion about it. Because for the people they are treating that way, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if they're full of shame and full of guilt or not. What matters are their actions. The actions matter. Regardless of what's causing it, actions matter first and foremost. Now, you might choose to be a little more understanding depending on the cause, right? So, for example, someone's autistic and they're much more awkward and maybe blunt. All right, you might understand and be a little more understanding of some of their social issues. But even still, in that case, if you're autistic, you still got to work on being socially calibrated. You still got to try to improve. Your neurodevelopmental issue is not an excuse to not try to improve or take responsibility. So that's what I would say. I don't know, Glovin. I think he seems to have some vulnerable narcissist traits, if you ask me. I'm not saying for sure, but he seems to have some of it. Now, is that the only thing? No, I mean, there could also be undiagnosed autism. It could be schizophrenia too. I don't know. Could be many things. We won't know. We won't know until we hear what the defense team says. We won't know what he was on until we hear that and see that toxicology report. So much that we don't know. There was a great age disparity between Nick and Rob. Yeah, that doesn't help. Thank you, but why? I mean, clearly his behavior is psychopathic. And this is why some people, especially in the Instagram, social media space for therapy, people go too far into the paint on the validation of things. And there comes a point where that validation alone is not good. Because for this very reason, this is a potential outcome, I think, of too much validation, too much enabling, too much coddling, all out of the fear of, I don't want to be invalidating. I don't want to be perceived as maybe a not loving parent. But it's like, no, boundaries don't make you an unloving parent. Enforcing consequences don't make you an unloving parent. People need to get rid of that idea because it's just not true. It's just not true. And yeah, there is no proof he was abused either. I mean, the Rob Reiner roast is doing so much footwork in people's speculation of that. And some people say there's some Rob Reiner / Epstein connection there too. But we don't know. We just don't know. That's all speculation. I mean, like I said, I don't really get the abusive vibe from Rob, really. He might have been like grandiose and some like maybe arrogant and maybe socially uncalibrated in a way. But I don't really get that bad narc vibe. Again, but it doesn't mean he couldn't have been. We don't know. We don't know how they were behind closed doors. But the other siblings, like the way Romy would talk to her dad, didn't seem like he'd be abusing her. Now, granted, their conversations were pretty awkward, by the way. She's talking to him about getting a Brazilian butt lift. Like, who the hell talks about that with their dad? A little weird, but that's Holly weird for you, right? Which one, Tooth 5? You're saying I missed one? I think we got them all. What was the other one I missed then, Tooth 5? Because I don't see it on the screen here. Yeah, Finisher, he might have a lower level version of narcissism. He'll be a little narcissistic, as any like director who's very wealthy might. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. You have to see how he acts behind closed doors to truly know. Just that Nick might have taken revenge with tough love from Rob. I don't think so, because I think he got the opposite of tough love. I mean, maybe in the very beginning when they listened to the professionals, but it sounds like for years, they weren't doing that anymore. For years, they were acting like Nick is the expert on himself. That's the opposite of tough love. If anything, they should have. I mean, and again, some people who don't want to give tough love, they might say what you just did. They say, oh, see, someone might take revenge on you for tough love. Well, here's the thing. You can't force someone to get better. You have to do what's best for you. And so if you're Rob, you got to protect your family, regardless of what the other person thinks or feels about it at a point. There's nothing wrong with doing that, especially now since we know the outcome, right? But let's say, for example, Rob cut off his son, kicked him out, and maybe he's homeless. Would he get criticized for that, maybe? For being heartless? Maybe. But maybe what we wouldn't know, because in the alternative universe, actually Nick offs his parents instead. So that's the alternative. And that's the thing about these cases. We just don't know. We don't know what the alternatives are. We don't know what would happen if what happened didn't happen. So it's really hard to speculate. Again, if that guy on the train in North Carolina is committed, that woman on the train doesn't die. But now it's also not a news story. No one knows it happened. No one knows it was prevented. Let's put it that way. But when the worst case happens, then everyone can point at that and say, see, look at how awful that was. But we don't have a way to keep score of all the things that get prevented. So the people that are in jail that can no longer commit crimes. It's a good thing too, right? All right. Well, he did turn 18 without a plan. You got that right. But all right, about time to wrap this up here. Yeah, I mean, our addiction system and mental health system certainly needs some work. I do think this case proves there needs to be a way to commit people without their permission for the safety of other people. And some people might be a little scared of that, to which I would understand. It's a bit of power to give the government, but at the same time, you got to protect people too. So there would just need to be clear criteria to be met for what kind of person gets committed against their will. And that's a discussion for the licensed professionals. It's a discussion for the people that maybe are in law enforcement or the prison system. They're the ones that know. They're the ones that see it all the time. Thank you, Irish. I appreciate you being here. You got it, everybody. I'm glad. What a great flock of black sheep that's here, by the way. Great to spend almost 4 hours with you all on a Saturday night. Yeah, we can solve the world's problems here. We can make it a movement. You got it, Wyndham. You have a good night, Ellie. And you too, Crazy. And everyone else, thanks for being here. I appreciate you all. You got it, Marine. Thanks for being here.